Welcome to the enchanting world of Bella Brown's historical Western romance. I'm delighted to share this journey with you today. Before we ride into the story, if you enjoy these narrations, please consider subscribing to this channel. It's a small gesture that makes a big difference, and your support makes it possible to continue bringing these heartfelt tales to listeners everywhere, completely free of charge. Now find yourself a comfortable spot, close your eyes if you wish, and allow your imagination to travel back to the American frontier where adventure and romance await. This audiobook presentation features His Fiery Bride by Bella Brown, all rights reserved. You forget your place, my child. Fergus O'Connell flung his daughter through the bedroom door and stabbed a finger at her through the air. You belong to me. I pay for the clothes on your back, the food in your belly, the roof over your head. You will do as I say, and that is the end of it, you hear me? 15-year-old Ciara looked up at her father, where he loomed in the doorway. She glared at him, defiance radiating from her, her small fists clenched by her sides, but she wisely remained quiet. Too many times her quick mouth had ended up with her getting a beating. Fergus, with his wild red hair framing his bloated puce face, took a menacing step towards her. Ciara, you will marry who I say when I say. You killed your mother on the way out, and this is your way of paying back the family. I will hear no more on the matter. Yes, Da, she muttered. You stay in here until that idiot Doyle comes to collect his bride. The door slammed back into its frame, and she listened to the heavy bolt grind back into the lock. She refused to let the tears burning at the back of her eyes fall. She was used to the insults that her father bellowed at her. Ever since she could remember, he'd told her the same story. She was his to do with as he pleased. And now he'd promised her to a revolting man who smelled of fish and was older than her Da. She didn't know why, nor did she care. She turned to the small window in her bedroom and perched on the wide sill, tucking her feet up under her. The moon was big and wide in a clear night sky, and the chill from the glass diffused across her forehead, where she leaned against it as her breath bloomed across the window. Outside, she could make out the familiar shapes of the small cottages in the moonlight, the tall tree lines, where the village of Ballynabrana lay, sleeping under the crisp February night sky. Movement below her drew her eyes, and she peered more closely, with her eyes narrowed. Her heart kicked up a beat as she watched her big brother Cormac scale the stone wall at the back of their yard. He turned and dropped a large canvas sack into the lane that ran through the center of the village before he dropped out of sight momentarily. Then his head reappeared, and he crossed to the corner of the street, where he ducked into the shadows to wait. Curiosity getting the better of her, Ciara put on her shawl, tucked the ends into her belt. She edged the window open, her pulse racing as she wiggled the stiff frame upwards, paused to listen to ensure her Da hadn't heard it. In a familiar move, she hooked her leg over the edge and felt for the top of the porch with the tip of her boot. Then she climbed out of the window and shimmied down the front of the cottage, dropping into the garden. She gasped in pain as the shock ricocheted up her legs, paused again as she looked up over the squat stone cottage where she'd spent her childhood. It remained dark and quiet. She crossed to the wall and peered over it, in time to see the second figure follow Mac along the edge of the road. She knew who it was. Her brother's best friend was like his shadow. Quickly, quietly, she scrambled up over the wall, intent on following them. They shouldn't be out here, any more than she should. Her breath plumed in front of her, the ghostly world sparkling with frost where moonlight kissed it. Somewhere, a fox screamed into the darkness. Ciara pushed on, as her brother and his friend walked purposefully through the night, leaving the sleeping village far behind. She knew the road to the port of Queenstown well. Some of the locals still called it by its old name of Cobb, as it had been long before the Queen had visited, and the town had changed its name. And as realization dawned on her, she knew where Mac was going. He'd told her many times that he would leave this place. Leave it and their Da far behind. The wind picked up and began to snap her red hair into her face, carrying with it the tang of sea air and the pungent odor of fish. The buildings stretched up taller as dawn began to edge back the dark night, creeping slowly over the horizon. The hand snaking around her bicep trapped the scream in her throat, and she spun round, her breath whooshing out of her as she looked up into a pair of green eyes as vivid as her own. "Ciara," Mac hissed out. "Get home." She yanked her arm from his grip and glowered up at him, cross with herself for her mind drifting off and not realizing that she had caught up with them. "I will not," she muttered back. "I'm coming with you." "No, you're not." Mac shook his head vehemently as he pointed back down the road. "Go back now. Dad will have a fit when he sees you're gone." Ciara folded her arms, as much of one when he sees his precious son has absconded too. "You can't come with us. You don't have a ticket, and I don't have the money to buy you one." A brow hooked up as she stared mutinously at her brother. Patrick, who was stood behind him, sniggered as Mac warred with his predicament. "Ciara, it's not safe. You should go home." Home? She'd never felt like she'd belonged there, being reminded that daily that her poor ma had died giving birth to her, and being regularly beaten and berated. She shook her head as she gazed at her brother. Without him in her life, she would be all alone. The tears from earlier pushed through to leak over her lids. "Please, Mac, don't leave me here alone. He's promised me to Mr. Doyle. I'm to be his wife to pay off Da's debts." Her brother dragged a hand through his red hair as he swung his gaze to Pat. Pat shrugged his reply. "It's up to you." Ciara caught her brother's hand. He was 4 years older than she was, already a man. He was broad and tall and wore his hair long and shaggy around his face. "I'll be good. Please, take me with you. I don't want to marry a smelly old man." Max sighed as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. "I don't have the money for another ticket for you, Ciara." Ciara sensed his resolve wavering, and a smile curved her lips. "Uh-oh." Pat slung an arm around Mac's shoulders. "When she gets that look in her eyes, you know there's trouble brewing." "Just point the ship out to me. I'll get on it," Ciara said. Mac lifted his arms into the air, growled with exasperation. "Fine, but if you get caught, on your head be it." Ciara clapped her hands together and followed the two boys as they carried on along the road to the port, and the road grew busier with more carts and wagons trundling past them. In the early morning light, Ciara could make out the masts of the boats, their sails tied neatly down. The closer they got to the town, the more people there were, and soon they were engulfed in the crowd. Mac reached out a hand for his sister to keep her close. When they got to the port, Ciara could see so many boats huddled together in the water. Some were linked by gangplanks, others were moored further out in the water. 2 of the hulking steamships had railed gangways on the marina wall, where passengers streamed along with them. Ciara felt the buzz of excitement, the thrill of expectancy in the air. Mac quickly pulled her into a hug after he'd pointed out the ship that he and Pat were destined for. Ciara assured him that she would be fine as they parted ways, and pulled her shawl up over her head and ducked her face down as she blended into the crowd. She pushed her fear down as she assessed the area and decided that the easiest way on would be into the belly of the ship. She could see lug 7%. She could see luggage and supplies being loaded up further along from the passengers, ship staff hurrying along the pier as orders were being bellowed out. She ducked behind a crate and watched the process. It was the loud crash, followed by lots of shouting and running steps, that gave her the perfect opportunity. Without looking back as to what the cause was, she grabbed a small box, kept her face averted, and trotted up the plank, crossing the black waters of the sea below as she stepped into the ship. The interior was damp, dark, and musty, lit only by sporadic lamps lining the walls of the space. Ciara climbed over the sacks and boxes, diving further into the space, and tucked herself away. She lay atop the sacks for what seemed like an age before she was shrouded in darkness when the doors were shut. The exit was easy to spot, light framing the narrow doorway, and, as the steam engines chugged to life, Ciara clambered her way to the top. She cracked open the small hatch, taking in a big pull of fresh air as she peered out. Most of the passengers were at the edges of the deck, pressed against the railings, and did not notice the child clambering out of the hold. Ciara soon joined them, squeezing through the crowd until she reached the barrier. The wind kicked up as the boat sailed out of the port. She placed her forearms along the top rail and dropped her chin to her arms, filled with a mixture of trepidation and exhilaration. She had no clue what lay in front of her. Indeed, even if Mac and Pat had made it onto the ship, had her Da realized that his children had left yet? She knew for certain that she wouldn't go back, yet felt woeful to be leaving all that she held familiar. She had nothing with her, none of her belongings, her books. It doesn't matter. She told herself she had nothing to go back for. If she stayed, her life would be over. The dark expanse of water grew between ship and land, carrying her further away. The familiar sight of St. Colman's Cathedral loomed over the port, the rolling green hills that rose behind it, the gulls swooping overhead. Ciara drank in her last ever sight of Ireland as she headed to a life in the New World. Chapter 1. 4 years later. Dearest Ciara, hello from sunny California. Not much has happened since I last wrote to you, apart from I'm leaving the wee boarding house here to move closer to the mine. When I get the address, I will send it on to you. The working days are long and hot down in the mine, to be sure, but it's good work and it pays well. A bit like I heard when I first arrived, the boss tends to make some wee cuts to save money, but who can blame a man for wanting to save a penny? Still, it's a job and I'm not hollering on top of another man just to try and get a decent day's work. It beats the docks, that's for sure. How's the new job treating you? Good, I hope. And I hope you're staying out of trouble. I know you'll say the same to me when you write back. Just know that I'm working hard to make a go of it out here. The sun always seems to shine here, though it can get cold at night. Copperdowns isn't quite desert, nor just mountains. It's different from a city and not as green as back home. Maybe you might like a trip out here when you are more established at that grand house, eh? At least this way is over land. Did Pat write back to you yet? I've not heard a peep out of that chancer. No doubt he's acting the maggot in a saloon somewhere along the way. I know you said not to, but I have included some money. I am managing to save some. I don't like the thought of my wee baby sister all alone in New York, with no one to look after her. After all, it's my fault you're in America in the first place. I wish I could see your wee face, if only for a moment. I miss you, Ciara. Stay safe and well. God bless, Cormac O'Connell. Ciara blinked hard against the tears that stung her eyes as she read the letter. How many times has she read it in the past 3 months since she had first had it? It had been the last time she'd heard from Mac. She'd sent her reply, plus 2 others to the address she had for him. No replies had been forthcoming. She traced her fingertip over his name and sighed. She folded the letter away and tucked it back into the top drawer at the side of her bed as she heard footsteps outside in the passageway. The grand house, as Mac called it, was indeed grand. Ciara shared the small room with 2 other maids. The loft was windowless, cold in the winter, sweltering in the summer. But it was a comparative palace to the room she'd lived in with Mac and Pat when they'd first arrived in New York 4 years ago. They'd ended up in 5 Points, along with all of the Irish immigrants who'd stepped off the boat in search of a better life. It was overcrowded, smelly, and noisy. Ciara turned her head as the door opened and smiled as Liv stepped into the room. The other maid took one look at her friend and crossed to sit on the bed, then gathered Ciara into her arms. Still no word? Ciara allowed the tears to fall just this once. No, she muttered dejectedly. I have the feeling something is desperately wrong. You mustn't think like that, Liv leaned back. You must keep your thoughts good. The Lord will take care of him, I'm sure. Ciara longed for her friend's eternal optimism. We've been through so much already. I knew I should have gone with him. It's no place for a woman out there, Liv chided. Besides, you wouldn't find a house as grand as this. The only women who go out there are mail-order brides, and she blushed as her words tripped over themselves. Women who work in saloons, she added with a harsh whisper. Ciara ghosted a smile. I heard the same story from Mac and Pat when we were traveling to New York in the first place. I've made it this far, mostly on my own. Liv shuddered. You're braver than most people that I know, Ciara, but the frontier? No, you're safer here in New York. He'll get in touch when he can. Ciara's reply was cut off as Ada opened the door. She saw the other two maids huddled on the bed and rolled her eyes disdainfully. "What are you two scheming about?" she asked as she set the candle down on the side. Liv, always running interference between the sullen Ada and the fiery Ciara, leaped to her feet. "Why would we be scheming?" Ada angled a look at her, hands paused on the cap. "Because that's what you two always do." Liv laughed shrilly, took off her apron, and hung it up. "No, we don't." "I suppose she is still moping over her drifter brother," Ada muttered. "He's probably dead, murdered by robbers." Liv put a calming hand out as she saw Ciara tense up. She shook her head as Ada removed her dress. "Everyone knows that's what happens in those places. I know of lots of people who went there and died. No one knows what happened to them. They were just dead. I say, good riddance to bad rubbish. One less person to steal our jobs." Ciara pushed to her feet and narrowed her eyes. Liv stepped into the breach between them, watching them both warily. "Ada, must you always be so provoking?" Liv sighed. Ada stood next to her bed, her eyes on Ciara as she prodded her verbally. "What's the matter, Ciara? Cat got your tongue?" Irritation rippled through Ciara as she glared at the other maid. She knew that she was deliberately provoking her. Hadn't she always done so since she had first arrived? The slurs and name-calling had been a daily occurrence to Ciara since she had stepped off the boat. The insults bounced off her normally. The young maid seemed to have a problem with Ciara. Liv surmised that it was because Ada had been her friend before Ciara had arrived. Today, though, the barbs hit home more. Ciara pictured herself grabbing the other woman's hair and giving her a good hiding. But then, she would lose her position here, and without a good character to go on to a new place, she would no doubt be blacklisted in other jobs as a maid. The meager savings that she had wouldn't last long, and she would be back in 5 points. Without Mac or Pat to look after her this time, she would be done for as a lone woman in a big city. "You're not worth it, Ada Briggs," Ciara muttered and turned her back. "What did she say, Olivia? I couldn't understand her accent." Liv told her to be quiet as the three of them got ready for bed. Ada flung out a few more epithets, but Ciara ignored her, climbed into her cot, and pulled the pillow over her head. "Ada Briggs has always had ideas above her station," Luke commented as he emptied the barrow of dung into the muck heap. He kicked a few stray pieces of dung and headed back to the stables. Ciara followed him at a distance, leaned against the stable's doors as Luke continued, "I wouldn't listen to her. She's trying to get a rise out of you, so you get the sack. She is just sad and spiteful." His comments lifted her lips. Her chores had been done for the morning, and so she'd slipped out of the back of the house for a few minutes alone with her friend. Luke had been the first person she'd seen when she'd arrived at the house. His job was managing the stables and the horses, driving the family wherever they needed to go. Simple work, and he loved it. She had always preferred being outside in the fresh air, too. It seemed to call to her more. Ada's words last night had hit home more than she'd let on, though she would surely bite her tongue off than admit this. "Do you think Mac is dead?" Luke paused, a fork full of hay in the air as he looked at her. He took a moment to contemplate her, then he shook the fork, scattering the hay over the stable floor. He spread the bedding out with his feet before he nodded towards the door, indicating that he'd finished. Ciara stepped back out into the crisp spring air. The mist had cleared as the sun burned its way through. Birdsong filled the air, and beyond the yard, Ciara could see some of the horses out to graze. It soothed her being surrounded by green pastures, reminding her of the rolling hills of home. Luke bolted the stable door behind him, his floppy brown hair springing loose as he pulled off his cap. He swiped at the locks impatiently. "The question will drive you insane. Honestly, I don't know if he's alive or dead. I know that he wrote to you consistently when he first got there. He cared enough to send you some money." He leaned back, bracing a booted foot down against the door, and folded his arms. "The only way to truly find out is to go and look for yourself." Ciara sighed. "I know, but I dropped lucky with this place. It's a good job, pays well, and she's a decent and fair boss. The work is hard, but it beats being in a factory or worse, back on the streets again. You could always let her know what you are doing and ask for a reference." There are hotels and the like out there. Maybe you could get a job if the boss gave you a reference. Ow, you little imp. Luke leaped forward, clutching the back of his arm, and he turned to face the little pony who'd stuck her head over the neighboring stable door. Ciara gave a belly laugh as she saw Poppy, the beloved pony of Ruby, their boss's only daughter, nuzzling for treats. She held out a hand, palm flat, as Poppy's lips burrowed into it. She's only hoping for carrots or mint candies. Of course you'd say that. She doesn't bite you, Luke muttered, aiming a dark look at the skewbald as he rubbed his arm. None of them do. Ciara rubbed a hand between Poppy's eyes and then scratched at her forelock, sending the mare into a delirious eye roll. What can I say? Horses and I get on. Must be my Irish blood. It's sorcery is what it is. I've never known someone get on with horses as you do. You should be doing my job. Oh, and you're going to empty chamber pots. Luke lifted a shoulder. I empty the horse's chamber pot. Where's the difference? You going to wear the apron and cap too, then, she teased. His dark eyes lit with humor. I'd best get on. Aye, me too, Ciara murmured, lifting Poppy's nose to kiss the soft, furry skin. Luke stopped to look back at her. Have you written to the mine owners? Maybe they know what's happened? Of course. No, but that's a great idea, Luke. Ciara thanked the stable hand as she walked back towards the door, filled with renewed hope. Surely, if anyone knew what had happened to her brother, it would be the owner of Sediment Creek Mining Company. Chapter 2. The post had arrived late on in the day. Ciara had all but snatched the envelope from the housekeeper's hand, her heart in her mouth. Instead of her brother's familiar scrawl, her name was neatly printed across the front of it. Her dismay was replaced with the hope that maybe it contained news on her brother. She had to wait until all her chores were done, and she was dismissed for the evening by the housekeeper before she could steal away to read the letter in peace. She ducked into the storage closet, unwilling to return to the loft that she shared with the maids in case Ada showed up. If it was to be bad news, she might not hold on to her temper this time. She set the oil lamp down and knelt on the floor, angling the paper towards the light as she read the letter. Dear Miss O'Connell, I write in reference to your letter received 4 days ago and inquiring after your brother, Cormac O'Connell. I have checked with the foreman, but we have never had an employee under that name. As you can imagine, a mining company this size employs a lot of men. Some are transient, so I'm afraid the brief description of your brother given hasn't helped either. I wish you luck in your future endeavors to track your brother. From Noah Wiley, co-owner, Sediment Mining Co., Copperdowns, California. Ciara sat back and felt her hope dissolve like sands in the wind. She'd been pinning her dreams on this being the one answer that would help her. Oh, Mac, where are you? She whispered in the darkened closet. She looked over the letter again, looking for any other hints or signs. Mac had often intimated that the owners who ran a company disregarded the safety of their workers in favor of making more money. After all, there were so many men hunting their fortunes, and there were always more migrant workers looking for a better life. She wondered why this Noah had answered when she'd written to someone called Abel Wiley, who was listed on all of the adverts as being the owner. The letter had only served to bring up more questions, without the answer to the one question she'd asked. What had happened to her brother? She remembered their arduous journey across the Atlantic, and how Mac had comforted her when the seasickness had become particularly bad. He'd gone without food himself after they'd first arrived here, and he'd used the cents he'd scraped together to look after her. He'd kept her close as they'd forged a new life together in 5 Points, ensuring her safety. It was only when she'd got the job here at the house and was able to stand on her own 2 feet that he decided to head to the frontier for work. She'd been sad that he'd left, yet hadn't wanted to stop him from living out his dream of finding a better life. She blinked away her futile tears. What good would crying do? She swiped at her wet cheeks, sniffed again. She needed to know what had happened to him. If he was with God, then so be it. There didn't seem to be any other explanation. Looking down at the neatly printed name that signed off the letter, her eyes narrowed. There was something fishy going on at this mine, she thought. She knew, deep within her, that something was terribly wrong. What if Mac needed her? She needed to know one way or the other. She knew her brother, knew him well enough to know he wouldn't just end communication with her unless something was wrong. "Guess I'll be going to California then," she whispered. "I have a sinking feeling I won't ever see you again." Liv's big blue eyes brimmed with tears. They were stood on the platform of the train station, the hulk of the train hissing and puffing at the side. Passengers, train staff, people billowed around them, an ebbing tide of activity and sound. Prosody rate %. "I will write to you as soon as I'm settled. I have the address of the boarding house out there. Mrs. Peters was kind enough to secure me a room there upon my arrival." Ciara rubbed her friend's arms, her fingers linking with Liv's when they slid down. She didn't want to fill her friend with false hope and tell her she would be coming back. She had no idea what she would find in Copperdowns, or if she would ever return to New York. The idea filled her with a fear that she refused to voice. She'd traveled before, but this time she was alone. She was leaving behind a steady job and her good friends in Luke and Liv. "Yes, write to me as soon as you're there. I want you to tell me all the sights and sounds you see. At least I might not be sick this time, and it won't be 8 weeks of torture. I wish I was going with you." Ciara's lips curved up in a smile, and she pulled her friend in close. "If only that were the case, I'd take you in my reticule right now. I will miss you, to be sure. Don't let Ada bully my replacement." Liv squeezed her right back. "I will miss you too." A whistle rented the air, and a guard waggled his pocket watch at them. "Oh, that's my signal to go. They won't hold this train." Liv stepped back. "Okay, may God bless you and keep you safe." "You too, Olivia. Thank you for being my friend." Liv nodded as the tears got their way and tipped over her lids, tracking unchecked down her cheeks. Ciara pulled herself into the carriage, pushed down the sash window, and leaned out. The train let out a long, shrill sound. It jerked, hissed, and squeaked as it began to puff out of the station. Ciara waved long after her friend was obscured by smoke, long after the station disappeared. She hoped that she was making the right decision by tracking halfway across this wonderful country that she had chosen to make her home. She hoped that she had the strength to face whatever was waiting in Copperdowns for her. Chapter 3. "Your accent Irish?" Ciara lifted her clear green eyes to the young woman sat opposite her. She looked older than Ciara, with mousy brown hair and golden brown eyes. Her face was more rounded, and she was dressed well in a smart blue skirt with a plain shirt in a lighter blue. Ciara studied her, lips pursed. The young woman had gotten on the train a couple of stations ago. The train had stopped and allowed passengers off to get something to eat, stretch their legs. When Ciara had returned to her seat, the young woman was engrossed in a book. Ciara tried to gauge the stranger for malice, for a spiteful glint. She saw none. She suppressed a sigh and braced herself for one of the usual immigrant slurs that were normally thrown her way. "Aye, that's right." The young woman beamed with delight. "Oh, how interesting. How long have you been in America?" Ciara blinked, suspicious, unsure of her motives. "About 4 years. We had a family who lived along the street from us who hailed from Ireland. Lovely family. He was a big man. My mama said that there was nothing that he couldn't fix. Helped my ma out a lot before she passed on. Oh, now, where was it he said they were from? Kenny something. Kilkenny? Yes." The young woman clapped her hands. "Kilkenny. Do you know it? Maybe you know the family?" Ciara shook her head at the familiar question and smiled. "There's a few of us about. It's a small country compared to here, but we were all still a bit spread out back there." "Oh, you're right, I suppose." She sat back, deflated. Her eyes drifted out the window, where the urban city line was fading out, with more open spaces as it began to flatten into pastures. "I'm sorry about your ma." "Oh," the young woman sighed. "Thank you. That's very kind. I never knew me ma. She passed as she was having me." The pitying look she sent to Ciara wasn't uncomfortable. "That must have been tough. I'm Adeline McPherson. My mother called me Addie." "Ciara O'Connell. That's a beautiful name." Outside the window, oak made way for spruce to larch trees, a myriad of greens and yellows blurring as they began to climb into the mountains. The train puffed out little cotton clouds, its rhythmic clatter strangely soothing to Ciara. "Where are you headed?" Addie asked, drawing Ciara's gaze back. "California. Me too. I'm glad to have some company for the journey then." Addie seemed relieved. "I admit, I'm fairly nervous to be making such a voyage. You hear some dreadful stories of what can happen." Addie glanced around her, then leaned forward in a conspiratorial manner as she added in a whisper, "Robbers and outlaws." Her hand went to her throat as if to settle herself, and she leaned back. Ciara hadn't even considered the journey a dangerous one, much less be thwarted by a criminal. "Ach," she waved a hand, dismissing Addie's fears. "It'll have to be a big man with an equally big gun to stop me on my mission. I got me a temper, that's for sure. I can send most men running for cover." Addie clapped gloved hands over her mouth to hush the delighted gurgle of laughter. "Somehow, I can quite believe that, Miss O'Connell. Tell me, what is your mission?" Normally, Ciara was quite closed off to strangers. It was a defense mechanism to hold her secrets and thoughts close to her chest. Yet, there was something about the affable Addie that comforted her, and they were going to be stuck on the train with nothing to do for hours. "I'm off to search for my brother." She told the story of how Mac's letters had suddenly stopped. "It's not like him. He's always looked out for me. I'm fearful that something awful has happened." Addie had listened, fascinated, her brown eyes growing bigger as the tale went on. "What if you find out that he's passed on, that the Lord has him now?" The thought of not seeing her brother's contagious smile or hear his voice once again pained her deeply. "I pray hard every day that that isn't the case, at least until I've had the chance to say goodbye to him. If he has," she couldn't bring herself to say the words, "I want to know one way or the other." "This mine, you say where he was working. Where is it?" "In a place called Copperdowns," Ciara said, her keen eyes meeting Addie's gasp. "What?" A smile bloomed on the other woman's face. "I do believe that we are to be firm friends, Miss O'Connell, for the man I am due to marry is from the same town." "Would you believe it?" Ciara leaned back in her seat, her green gaze sparkling. "If we are to be friends, then, my dear Addie, you must be calling me Ciara." "So what brings you out here?" Addie's smile turned wistful, almost dreamy. "I'm to be married." Ciara hooked a brow, inviting her newfound friend to elaborate. "There is an office in New York. I heard talk of it in the past, where you can view advertisements placed by gentlemen who are looking for female companions. After my mama passed on, I was lost, bereft. She didn't have much, and what was there was soon swallowed up paying to bury her, and to settle the cost of the bills. I went to seek out this office after recalling it one evening, just before I fell asleep. The owner, he was quite the fancy sort, well-dressed. He seemed to be fairly used to seeing women calling, seeking someone in this manner. I was soon settled into a room there and read the articles that were in the folder the fancy man had given to me." "Were there many?" Addie nodded. "I read each and every one. Some of them." Her nose wrinkled in distaste. You could almost hear the demands rising off the paper. "Fetch this, do that." The image of Fergus O'Connell and his overbearing mannerisms roared into Ciara's mind's eye, giving her a nervous kick. She pushed the image away. "I hope that you didn't reply to one of those types?" "Goodness, no." Addie fanned herself delicately with one of her gloved hands. "Oh, Ciara, when I read his words, I got this funny feeling, like I was supposed to be there at that moment. Does that sound ridiculous?" Ciara smiled and shook her head. "Not to me. His name is Andrew. He's a blacksmith. He had a wife, but she died. He's been left to bring up 2 boys and was looking for help with them." She set the hand she'd been waving against her breastbone. "His letters have kept me awake at night, and I'm just giddy with butterflies waiting on meeting him. I feel foolish, but he wooed me by his letters. I haven't even met the man, and I already am in love with him." Addie lifted her shoulders in a shrug. Ciara didn't really understand the whole love thing. In her experience, love was a messy emotion. It got in the way of things. That's why she liked life in service. It was clean and orderly. She wouldn't be needing a man to help her as she had her own money. "I'm sure he doesn't know how lucky he is." "You'll get to meet him," Addie said. "He is to meet me off the stagecoach when it arrives at Copperdowns. I wonder if he will fetch the children with him, or if we shall have those first few moments alone. Ciara listened with half an ear as Addie continued to speculate about what her life would be like, how she'd brought a dress with her to get married in, as Andrew had expressed that he wanted to be wed as soon as possible. To Ciara, it seemed odd that she would rush into a marriage, that she would want to be tied to a man that she barely knew. She knew that Mac would tut at her cynicism and jibe at her to lighten up. She wondered what would be there to greet her at the end of the journey. They were to meet the stagecoach in Sacramento and take the 2-day coach trip to Copperdowns from there. Sure enough, Ciara had butterflies of her own tumbling away in her gut, though hers were to do with what was waiting for her in the strange mining town. She wanted answers, and she would be rattling on doors until she got her answer. The train journey took almost 10 days. Sat on hard, narrow benches, being shunted about had been tiring. The only reprieve came when they waited at stations as freight carts were added or removed, and it allowed for the two women to stretch their legs and get a bite to eat. Ciara had seen the first-class cars as she'd walked along one platform with their plush velvet-lined seats with fresh-cut flowers in vases and gracious, uniformed porters waiting on passengers' every whim. The train chugged its way along the narrow-gauge railway through Iowa and Nebraska before it ventured into the territories of Wyoming and Utah. The scenery revolved past the windows, changing from climbing mountains with sprawling forests, dropping away to deep valleys as the train clung to the side of craggy hills. They passed lakes as wide as any sea Ciara had seen, stunning and sparkling. They fed when they stopped. Passengers climbed on and off, and Ciara found that Addie was wonderful company. When they arrived in Sacramento, it was chaotic. Addie gripped onto Ciara, who forged her way through the amassed crowds, eyes narrowed against the smoke and fumes that billowed from the steam engines that waited at the platforms. The sun blazed down out of a clear blue sky, baking the hard ground and radiating from the red-bricked railway sheds that sat around. Ciara pulled Addie along. Each of the women held their case in the opposite hand as they tried to find the stagecoach that was waiting to disband the passengers like offshoots of a plant as it spread out west. Their stagecoach was able to carry 9 passengers seated on more hard benches. Ciara and Addie squeezed into the back row, and Ciara was grateful for the air that flowed through the open window that she was next to. The carriage rocked about as other travelers climbed onto the roof of the car, and the 4-strong horse team pounded the packed earth beneath their hooves, eager to be setting off. Their harnesses tinkled, the sound mingling with shouts and calls of drivers and their shotguns. They set off, and Addie gripped onto Ciara, who in turn held onto the leather thong above the door. The motion of the carriage wasn't as soothing or rhythmic as the train. The carriage bumped and jolted, her head colliding with the side of the carriage as the wheels bumped along the uneven roads. She gritted her teeth and held her tongue, instead choosing to focus on the new and foreign terrain beyond the window. Long stretches of barren ground, hardened beneath the merciless Californian sun that was as far as the eye could see. Scabby trees, interspersed with patches of brown pastures, filled the land. The unrelenting heat was only dispelled by the flow of wind through the window. They stopped at swing stations to change out the horses, smaller stations along the road where passengers alighted and new ones got in. They stopped for the first night at a home station where the two women chose to share a room to defray the cost. They enjoyed a meal of dried pork and a cup of cider. Even when Ciara woke the next morning, she still felt the effects of the rocking motion of the carriage. She'd chosen to leave her hair down today, though quickly regretted that once they were underway again. As the sun climbed in the sky, so did the heat of the day. The temperature served to stir up her irritation. The breeze whipped through the stage, tussling her hair across her face, adding to the sense of being overwhelmed from the travel, her worry over Mac, all combined to compound her sense of being cast adrift. When the stagecoach juddered to a halt, she was shoved against the frame by the cumulative weight of Adeline, and the large man sat on the other end, resulting in a bumped head. She bit back the pithy curse word and poked her head out of the window as she heard raised voices. Addie gripped her leg, and Ciara looked back at her. Her friend's eyes were as wide as saucers, and there was genuine fear mirrored in them. "What's wrong?" Ciara asked her. Addie's bottom lip disappeared in between her teeth, and she shook her head. Finally, one word popped out: outlaws. Chapter 4. Aiden Armstrong wasn't having a good day. He'd woken this morning to find the hen house had been ransacked overnight, probably a stray dog of some kind. He'd not even had time for breakfast before Billy, one of his ranch hands, had come by to tell him that the fence line had been breached, and his stock had moseyed on over to the neighboring farm. The owner's wife hadn't been best pleased, as her flower beds had been devoured. With a promise to compensate for the damage to appease her and to keep on good terms, Aiden had joined the two other men to fix the line and bring his escapees back home. He'd been riding back to the homestead picturing some lunch when Sam, the oldest boy of Donnie Michaels, who owned one of the local saloons, came up the drive at a hair-raising speed to blurt out that 6 of Aiden's horses were loose in the town and were being raced all over town by people trying to capture them. Aiden had called for Billy and the others, and they'd found the small herd of horses just outside the town. He saw his stallion pawing the ground, his sleek black coat covered in a frothy white sweat, and knew that his horses had been chased about some. He wasn't a superstitious man by any stretch of the imagination, but his luck of late seemed to run badly, and having the fence lines breached in 2 separate sections on the same night couldn't be down to coincidence. Still, there wasn't much he could do about that right now. He just had to get on with it and hope that whatever plan the Lord had in mind for him was all for the greater good. He needed to trust. When right now, he wanted to slap the stupid grin right off the mayor's face. The horses had drawn quite a few spectators, including the mayor and Abel Wiley. Aiden kept his expression neutral as his blue eyes skimmed over the other townsfolk. He had his suspicions that Abel Wiley had had something to do with the fencing issues. "Billy, start rounding them up." "Aiden, I am not going near that black beast. You know he has it in for me." Billy tapped his ride with his feet and made off for one of the youngsters. Aiden sighed, swung off his chestnut mare, and hooked her reins over the back of the wagon that Hal had just rolled up in. "Here you go, boss." Hal, his face as brown as the leather reins and gloves he wore, passed him a head rope. "I ain't going near the black one. I'll get the other ones, though." Aiden was painfully aware of the spectacle that he was making of himself, but he helped round up the other 5, all the while keeping an eye on his prize stallion. He was beautiful, but he had a grumpy temperament and was just as happy with his 2 back feet in the air as on the ground. Hal and Billy returned with 2 of the horses, attached them to the back of the wagon, went for the others. "If that beast destroys any more property in the township, you'll have to get a bank loan." "Willie Carson," the mayor grinned. "It's on the outskirts of town," Aiden pointed out. "They're fairly old anyways." "Don't matter a jot," Willie replied, pushing back his hat with a thumb and squinting at the remnants of a splintered wall. "I'm happy to have the animal shot if you can't control it." "That won't be necessary." Aiden ground out and began walking purposefully towards the stallion. The horse was worth a fortune to him in stud fees alone. He just had a bit of a reputation for being a crank, Aiden reasoned. Copperdowns was up in the hills, a mining town that was always busy. Even now, the stagecoach had rolled to a stop. "Great. More people to witness this humiliation," murmured Aiden. He tried to make his approach to the horse casual and heard the snorting even before he got anywhere near him. The horse stamped the ground twice and then sailed past Aiden. He tried again, got a bit closer, and had to dodge the flying feet as the stallion whizzed past him in the opposite direction. "Oh, you're not happy today, are you?" He spoke in a soft voice to the animal. His flanks quivered in the afternoon sunlight, the long mane and tail flowing as he trotted a bit further away. Aiden carried on his casual pace towards him. The horse trotted around him in a circle, almost mocking in a "can't catch me" taunt. Aiden gritted his teeth against the ripple of laughter through the group of men watching him. Aiden held his breath as he got even closer this time, keeping his tone soft as he held out a hand with the head rope in it. Then the horse went up on his hind legs, barely missing Aiden's head. The gunshot echoed across the hills as Aiden fell back on the ground. He held his breath, eyes whirling as he looked for the horse. He saw him about 20 feet away, eyeballing the crowd. Aiden saw Willie Carson lined up his rifle once more, and he jumped to his feet with a shout, which sent the horse off again. "Stop!" Aiden yelled. "Are you crazy?" "The animal nearly took your head off," Abel Wiley chuckled. "He needs putting down. We can't have that risk to the townsfolk here. Willie, you go right on ahead. I'll testify to the sheriff should he come knocking." "Willie, put that rifle down right this minute," Aiden snapped, ignoring Abel and his taunting laughter. "I will get him." "Abel's right, Aiden," Willie said, tongue-in-cheek. "That animal could kill someone. I'm best to put it out of its misery, just in case." Aiden inserted himself between the aim of the rifle and his animal, his heart pounding. He knew that Willie and Abel were the mean sorts, but he could not afford to lose the crazy horse. "Willie, please." "Well, now looky here," Abel murmured, his eyes moving off to the right of Aiden. When he sensed the rest of the group were looking at something else too, he thought it safe enough to take his eye off the mayor and risk a look. When he did, his breath stalled in his chest. He saw the flame-red hair first, cascading down her back, the sunlight glinting through it as he stared at her. She was slight in build, yet her pace was purposeful. She was walking straight towards that big, bad stallion. Aiden opened his mouth to warn her, but was too late as the stallion rounded on her. Chapter 5. "It's not outlaws," Ciara hissed at Addie, nudging her back. "Just some crazy men who are blocking the road with a wagon and some horses on the loose." "Are you sure?" Addie asked her worriedly. "You hear such stories." Ciara poked her head further out of the coach window. She could see a small crowd gathered, and more annoyingly, she could see the edge of the township. Irritation sparked inside. She didn't have time for this. That town had to be Copperdowns. She needed to find her brother. She flopped back into her seat with a huff. Perfectly sure. Just some men who can't control their animals. Her lips thinned in irritation and she folded her arms. "We can practically walk from here." "You'll stay put now, young lady," the larger gentleman informed her from the end of the bench, displeasure rippling through his tone. "We don't need any bother caused by the likes of you interfering." Ciara leaned forward and cocked a brow at him. Addie touched her hand and drew her attention, giving a shake of her head. With a sigh, Ciara sat back. She didn't need to be picking fights with strange men. She no longer had the protection of Mac or Patrick. A few of the other passengers began to fidget as the wait continued, and then lean out to see what the holdup was for themselves. It was the crack of gunfire that drew the scream from Addie and had the others ducking. Ciara could almost smell their fear. She poked her head back out of the window again, that fear turning to anger as she saw the gun lined up on the huge horse that was trotting around the lone man who was currently lying in the dirt. That poor, defenseless animal. With a growl of exasperation, Ciara was out of the stagecoach and stomping across the ground. She ignored the cries of the others to come back. As she passed via the wagon, she grabbed a head rope that was slung over the side. The horse was beautiful, his coat gleaming in the embers of the sunlight that dappled the ground. His nostrils were flared, and his keen dark eyes were watchful when she approached him. She heard the man who'd been in the dirt call out a warning to her, but she didn't break the eye contact she had with the stallion. "Who's a beautiful lad? Easy, easy," she began to croon softly to him as she approached. "Big and beautiful, aren't you? What are those men doing to you, eh?" The stallion was quivering and gave her a snort. She lifted a hand, not faltering a step towards him, and when she reached him, the horse stuck his muzzle into her palm. "Who's a big boy? You're a beauty, aren't you?" She quietly slipped the collar over his head and gave his thick neck a rub. In response, the stallion put his mouth on her shoulder and nuzzled her gently. "There's a good boy." "Ma'am?" Ciara turned her head towards the voice, and she scowled as she addressed the group in general. "You all should be ashamed of yourselves, especially you," she told the man who still held the rifle. "Why on earth would you try and shoot a beautiful animal such as this?" "That horse is dangerous," he shouted back. Ciara laughed as the stallion nibbled on the ends of her hair. "Oh, for sure," she called back. "I barely escaped with my life. Who does this magnificent animal belong to? You're holding up the coach." Aiden was staring. He became aware of this when he had to close his mouth. Had she taken leave of her senses? "Is she gone crazy?" he heard someone mutter. "She's gonna get herself killed." And then he watched as she watched straight up to that beast, no messing about. He watched as the stallion, the same one that had everyone running away in fear, stood as meek and mild as a mouse, as she hooked on the head collar over his huge head. He'd swear the beast even dipped his head so she could reach easily. The stallion stood by as that tiny slip of a girl rubbed him down and petted him the same way she would a puppy. "He's mine," he called out when she gave the mayor some backchat. He heard the ripple of laughter through the crowd. A quick glance at Willie told him that she'd burned his ego somewhat. Aiden ambled over towards the girl. Up close, she was even more beautiful. She had creamy skin, with a dusting of light freckles across the button nose, and all that red hair curled to frame her heart-shaped face. She had full, rose-colored lips, but those eyes, they were sharp and green as they assessed him in a measured look. "He's beautiful." She held her ground, met his gaze evenly as he reached her, though she had to look up at him. "Why are you letting people shoot at him?" "He's a menace," Aiden amended, "and I'm not letting them do anything. Someone damaged the fences last night. He got out." "And none of you could catch him?" Aiden snorted out a laugh as he put his hands on his hips. "Well, it's not like we didn't try, ma'am. You know your way around horses?" She looked about to answer, and then one of the men gathered somewhere behind him made a derogatory comment about her, and those amazing green eyes tracked to the group that was staring at them. She considered them all one by one. "Was it one of them who broke your fencing?" Aiden's mouth lifted on one corner. She was astute as well as beautiful. "I am not one to cast such aspersions, and neither should you." He held out his hand for the rope. "Thank you for your help." She passed it to him. "He's a magnificent animal. You should be kinder to him. Maybe he'll like you more for it." Aiden opened his mouth to tell her off for her sass, but she turned on a heel and was walking away from him before it registered. He watched her hips sashay and then was hit with a wave of regret. He hadn't even gotten her name. The stallion nudged him in the back and Aiden sighed, tugged at the head rope. "Yes, I know. Come on, you rotter. Look at the trouble you've gotten me into." Aiden looked back and saw the red head pulling herself into the stagecoach. No doubt she was a mail-order bride, and some lucky cowboy had struck gold with his advert. The same cowboy who would have to try and keep control of that beauty as well as her attitude. "If you can't manage your livestock, Armstrong, we might have to start fining you," Willie called out to him. Aiden tied the stallion to the back of the wagon and resettled his hat on his head. His gaze watched as the stagecoach rolled past, and he caught one more glimpse of the fiery girl as it headed towards the township. "You hear me?" Aiden turned his head to look at the mayor. Aiden sighed. All he wanted was a quiet life. He ambled over to the mayor where he stood next to Abel Wiley. "I hear you, Mayor Carson," Aiden murmured so that his voice didn't carry. "And you should hear this. Those fences didn't just happen to fall over in two separate places on the same night. It seems mighty coincidental that those same fences, the ones that have been in the ground without an issue since I took over the farm near on 5 years ago, upped and fell over in the same week that I stood in a town meeting and made a point about the mine encroaching on my land and causing the ground to sink, as well as affecting the water supply to my land." Willie's mouth began to flap like a fish out of water, and Aiden saw Abel pull himself taller. Aiden lifted his hands to soothe them. "Now, I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything untoward. Sure does sound that way to me," Abel stated, tugging at the back of his breeches. "Nope," Aiden shook his head. "I'm merely stating the facts as I see them. See here? If this happens again, well, then maybe I'll have a problem and I'll be taking it to the sheriff." Abel began to splutter, and the mayor put a hand on his chest as if to hold him back. "All right, Armstrong, you made your point. Take your livestock and be on your way." Chapter 6. "I still can't believe you did that," Addie giggled. her hand cupping her mouth to disguise the words. The man next to her gave them a stern look of disapproval. He'd already nearly popped a vein after she'd climbed back into the coach, and he'd told her off about how she'd endangered everyone. Ciara had succinctly told him to mind his own business, and the coach had then lapsed into silence. Ciara's gaze was looking out of the window at the town that they were in, with a small smile playing around her mouth. "I'm not one to wait around when I can see a job needs doing," she commented. "And I also cannot sit about and watch an animal be shot for no good reason." The coach pulled up outside the general store and rocked as the driver and shotgun hopped down, setting down the box on the dry ground with a bang before they opened the door. The driver nudged the shotgun driver back out of the way and held up his hand for Ciara to assist her down from the coach. "Ma'am," he nodded with a smile, "this is Copperdowns." Ciara thanked him and stood back, turning slowly in a circle to take in the sight of the township. It was a bustling place, and the coach had stopped in what seemed to be the center. All around her, folks hurried about their business. Buggies trundled over the dusty red ground or waited at the side. Horses were corralled or tethered to posts outside the small wooden stores, lazily twitching their tails as they dozed in the afternoon heat. The buildings were lined haphazardly, not neatly along the streets like she was used to in the city, and some of them had painted signs on the front to declare their business type. Saloons, barbers, a bank, a blacksmith. Ciara was surprised and intrigued by how these people had all congregated on the side of the hill. Beyond the town, the terrain was the color of burned sienna, rolling hills covered in scrub and sparse bushes. Whatever direction she looked, the mountains soared into the endless blue sky. Ciara took her bag, waited for Addie to collect her belongings. "It's bigger than I was expecting," she commented. "Andrew did describe it, though it was hard to imagine it. Goodness, I'm nervous. My heart feels as though it will burst from my chest. It's pounding that hard." Ciara put an arm around her friend. "Imagine how he's feeling, waiting on meeting such a beauty." Addie shuddered out her laugh. "You're good for my ego, Miss Ciara, that's true. Where did he say he would be meeting you?" "Just that he would. Oh my, that man is staring." "Do you think that's him?" Ciara followed Addie's line of sight and saw the man for herself. He was a thick-set gentleman, jet black hair that had been combed back and a heavy mustache framing his mouth. He was running the felted edge of his hat through his hands and moved from side to side. "Aye, that man looks about as nervous as can be. Go on and say hello to your future husband." Addie's wide gaze swung back to Ciara's. "Oh, I don't think I can do this. What if he's not like he was in his letters?" Ciara set her bag down and rubbed her hands down the length of Addie's arms. "Then he'll have me to deal with." Addie smiled. Her reply was interrupted as the black-haired man approached them. "Excuse me, ma'am." Ciara gently pushed Addie about and took a step back. "Yes? Might you be Adeline?" Addie bobbed her head. The smile that spread over his face was one of happiness, and he ducked his head. "I'm Andrew. I'm pleased to meet you. You're mighty prettier than I imagined. Can I take your bag?" "Oh, that would be most kind, thank you." Addie passed him her case and shot a look back at Ciara. "Will I see you again?" "You can be sure of that, for as long as I'm here. As soon as I find out what happened to my brother, I'll be returning to New York." Addie hugged her friend. "Good luck to you. I hope that you find him, and I do hope to see you again." "You will. I want to hear all about your news, too. Now, be off with you." Ciara wrinkled her nose with her smile and made a shooing gesture to Addie. She waited until her friend had been handed into the wagon and watched as it rolled through the town before she bent for her bag. She took another long look around. It felt strange to be here. She couldn't imagine Mac choosing a place such as this one. First things first, she needed to find her accommodation and get the layout of the town. Then she would begin her search. Mac had been here. She knew that much from his letters. And she was going to find out what had happened to him if it was the last thing that she did. Chapter 7. Welcome to Copperdowns. The landlady of the boarding house gave her a welcoming smile. "I'm Mrs. Chambers. You must be Miss O'Connell." "Aye, that's right," Ciara smiled. The landlady was elegantly presented in a shirt and belted skirt with her salt and pepper hair pleated neatly at the back of her head. She had a warm personality. The boarding house was also well-ordered and immaculate. It had simple wooden furniture and a long table that was serving as a reception area. Through the arch on her left, Ciara could see chairs arranged around a fireplace and a small bookcase along one wall. "Ooh, Irish?" Ciara nodded with a smile. "Yes, originally from New York right now. We've been expecting you. Mrs. Peters wrote to us to let us know you'd be coming. Her family and my husband are related by cousins. I guess you could say it's a small world?" "Not really, when I've just taken over a week to cross part of it," Ciara replied, and was rewarded with the tinkle of laughter. "You must be tired. Come, I'll show you to your room." She waited for Ciara to collect her reticule, and then led her along a passage and up a set of creaking stairs to the first floor. Mrs. Chambers chatted away over her shoulder. "The town is quite a big one, compared to others. We have a lovely church on the outskirts of the town. The sheriff keeps things in order, though you have a care if you're out after sundown. The mountain lions aren't the most dangerous things around these parts. Mrs. Peters said you were coming to visit family?" Mrs. Chambers stopped in front of a door and unlocked it, stepping back as it swung open. The room was charmingly rustic. The lemon bed linen gave the room a sunny disposition, and the patchwork comforter at the foot of the bed added a homely touch. The narrow dresser in the corner had a looking glass on top and a stool in front of it. The bowl and jug on the windowsill had yellow flowers on them. "I'm hoping to see my brother," Ciara commented as she stepped into the room. "This is just lovely, Mrs. Chambers. I'm glad you like it. We serve breakfast around 8 in the morning. If you need anything at all, you come to find me or Bud. That's my husband. We're always about. I'll let you get settled in." The door was closed, leaving Ciara all alone in the room. She set her bag on the comforter and crossed to the window. The Californian sun was melting into magentas and violets on the horizon, throwing the mountainous skyline into darkness. The town was nestled into the foothills and surrounded by redwoods and pine trees that hugged the hillside, stopping before the craggy-looking gray peaks that seemed to touch the sky. The town itself was bigger than she'd imagined, though there were no paved roads or organized blocks of stone buildings. From what she'd seen, the buildings were mostly timber or metal huts arranged along the dusty roads. Somewhere, a haunting train whistle echoed through the mountains, and Ciara sighed. She'd rushed here with only thoughts of finding Mac in the forefront of her mind. She'd not spared a thought of what she would find here. She was alone, in a strange part of the world, far from home. And mountain lions? Just what had she gotten herself into this time? Ciara rose the next morning and readied herself for the day. It was a strange feeling to look out of the window and see the new vista before her, much the same as when she'd left Ireland behind. She didn't have to think about getting to work, which was also an odd feeling. She joined Mrs. Chambers for breakfast and chatted idly, lingering over a coffee. Beyond the window, the day was already underway. The boarding house was at the edge of the town, and Ciara watched a myriad of chuck wagons, flatbed wagons, and buggies as they jogged past the window. She could see the buildings and enjoyed watching the people anonymously. "It's certainly busier here than I envisaged," she commented when the conversation lapsed. "It's a larger town than most. It's quite transient. We have people passing on through, and the mines employ a great deal. Some people settle, others move on." "How long have you and your husband been here?" "Mr. Chambers and I came down in the first rush to California. Almost 30 years. It's changed so much in that time. This wasn't our first choice. Bud came down here hoping to find his fortune, but being underground wasn't for him. Oh, he developed such a cough on account of all the dust that they kick up as they're burrowing away. So he decided to make a life above ground. We bought the house here and made it into a place for people to stay, long before any hotels were made," she added with a shake of her head. "These days, the town is more orderly and safer. We even got ourselves a mayor." Ciara recalled the stout little bespectacled man with the long rifle. "I believe I saw him yesterday. He opened fire on a horse." Mrs. Chambers put a hand to her chest. "You saw that? Rena from the Mercantile was talking about that." Seems it caused quite the stir. Course, I don't have a stomach for killing things, and neither did the mayor till that Abel Wiley got his claws in him. What do you mean? His daddy, Elijah Wiley, may the Lord rest his soul. He was a good and kind man. He passed on going on 15 months now. Since then, Abel, being the oldest boy, he took over and he's just been showing off, riding roughshod over the whole town. He's expanded the mine a lot quickly, too. He's got the biggest mine in the area for miles and miles now. He won't mind letting you know that, too. He has 2 younger siblings, though you don't hear or see much of Noah or the young girl, Ginny. I guess that Noah and Ginny take after their pa, being quiet in their nature. I never did meet their mama, but Elijah married a nice woman from up north, and she raised those children. She went back after old man Wiley passed on. I guess she didn't want to stay on with Abel in charge now. Ciara digested the information. Noah had been the one who'd replied to her letter. When Abel and Willie made fast friends, Abel seemed to take it upon himself to talk like he was the mayor around here, too. It sounds like Abel isn't all that popular, Mrs. Chambers. Ida gave her a little shrug. I'm not one to gossip, but I will say that Abel has been able to coast a while on the fond memories that folks around here have of his father. He might be running out of such good luck if he carries on. We have 4 mines in the area, the biggest being Sediment Creek, so it employs the most. While it's not the oldest, it certainly isn't the safest since Abel took over. Not even 3 months ago, there was a big accident there. The boom woke me straight out of my bed. Bud tells me to leave it be. No one knows the cause or if any of those poor men died or were injured. It happened, and no one talked about it. Ciara felt a little spurt of fear, mixed with some guilt, over pumping her landlady for information, though she seemed happy enough to chat. Mac. Could he have been involved in that accident? Is that why he'd stopped writing? Her heart thumped crazily against her rib cage as she pushed down her dread. Where is Sediment Creek Mine? Here in the town? Mrs. Chambers sipped her drink, set the cup back on the table. No, it's up the hill of Fairway, over towards that big bluff. Pro 7%. You can see some of the miners' huts if you go over to the next street. Ciara made a mental note to make that her first place to look for her brother. The miners? Do you know any of them? Mrs. Chambers nodded. Sure, honey. We've had some staying here, though not for long, as the beds that come with the jobs are included in their pay, and then the men. Ida's face pinched in disapproval, then dropped her voice to a whisper. Some of them visit the other side of town for their free time with women who, well, let's just say that they enjoy a man's company for a time. Ciara hid the smile at the landlady's obvious discomfiture when talking about such vulgar things. The door behind Ida opened, and a wiry man with thinning hair that was combed over the balding pate poked his head around the edge. Ida, I know for sure that you're not sat here idling away the morning with your chit-chat gossip when there's work to be done around here, woman. Ida set her cup down with a tut and swiveled in her seat. Bud, I am no gossip. I'm acquainting our guests with our town. It's an information service. Pa, Bud snapped. Get off your backside and do some work. The door closed with a bang. Ida sighed deeply that there is a man who needs to embrace the good Lord and learn some propriety. Either that, or remove the stick that is somewhere where the sun can't shine. Chapter 8. Aiden. You forgot to mention that you got shot at yesterday, Della Armstrong commented as she dropped into the chair. Aiden ducked his head against the hawk-eyed look his ma was giving him. He might be a grown man, but that look could still make him quake in his boots. Where'd you hear that? Rena, at the Mercantile. Della pushed her breakfast plate away to lean her elbows on the table. Why is the mayor taking pot shots at you? Aiden chewed his bread as he pretended to mull over the answer. I don't think he wasn't aiming at me, but at the stallion. Now, why on earth would he want to shoot our horse? I told you, Ma. The fences were breached. Willie claimed that the horse was a danger. Della's lips twisted. She picked up her coffee and took a swig. This is because you ruffled that Abel Wiley's feathers at the meeting hall last week. Aiden nodded. I think so. Abel doesn't like to be challenged. I'd like to give him a challenge. This is what happens when a boy doesn't get the whooping he needs when growing up. Makes him think he's entitled. I won't argue with that, Ma. As it happens, a young woman off the coach caught him. There was that knowing look again. I heard about that too. She just walked right on up to that big beast. Aiden nodded, his mind easily recalling images of the stunning red head. The same images that had fluttered around the periphery of his mind and flooded his dreams last night, so he'd woken tangled and bothered in his bed this morning. You need a wife. Rena said Andrew got himself a nice mail-order bride who arrived in town yesterday off the coach for him and his boys, a polite and sweet girl from New York. Green eyes and an Irish brogue pulsated in his center. He wondered if maybe that was Andrew's bride and felt jealousy streak through him. I told you before, Ma. I'm too busy for a wife. Della set down her coffee with a snap. And I've told you before, Aiden, when I'm dead and gone, who is going to take care of you? You need children, someone to pass the ranch on to. You should get yourself an advert, find yourself a wife. If you don't want to do that, find a maid or something from around here. You need a woman. You're a good-looking boy. The chair scraped rudely on the floor as Aiden pushed up. You have to say that because you're my mama. He leaned down to peck a kiss to the top of her gray hair. It doesn't mean you're right. Thank you for breakfast. Aiden picked up his hat and plopped it onto his dark hair, not looking back at his mother as he stepped out onto the porch. He didn't want to see the look of hurt on her face. It was a discussion that they'd had many times. He'd tried romance once. It had been a messy and awkward situation, and the girl had ended up leaving him for what she saw as a more appropriate suitor. The ranch had been his life. He'd taken pleasure from growing the herd, employing good men, and living a simple life. Did it matter that sometimes he felt like he was living vicariously through his ranch hands? Celebrating their life wins, the birth of a child of theirs, or when they wed a good woman? That sometimes, in the dark of the night, he felt twinges inside that could be loneliness, though he didn't know what he was pining for. He shook off the melancholy and found Billy, Hal, and the others milling around in the yard, waiting on their orders for the day. He had fences to check, stock to worry about, and a mother who was hell-bent on finding him a woman. He had enough to worry about without getting all misty over some mysterious redhead, wondering if she was with the blacksmith or married now to some faceless cowpoke. He wished he'd asked her for her name. Ciara passed by the grocery store and a fine butcher's shop, the barber's shop with its candy-striped pole outside, and the trim little schoolhouse. People went about their day, with the sun blazing in an endless azure sky. Their pace was slower than in the city, where the frenetic energy of carriages and hawkers built to a cacophony of liveliness. Here, folks ambled, stood by to chat, and their vitality shone from the smiles that they gave her. Strangers called out a greeting to her, wished her a pleasant day. She followed the street layout, getting to know the town. As Ida had said, Ciara saw the small, neat rows of wooden miners' cabins in numerous rows up on the side of the hill. Ciara set off for them, her breath puffing and a light sheen of sweat on her lips by the time she stepped through the fenced-in yard. She saw some women working fastidiously in the sunshine, lines of laundry strung out. One of them was butchering an animal. Small children were playing a game with pebbles and a stick. All of them stopped to watch the stranger enter the enclosure. Unease rippled through Ciara. There wasn't the same relaxed atmosphere up here. "You lost?" one of the women called out. She shaded her face with her hand to study Ciara. "I'm looking for someone," Ciara answered her, coming to a halt in the middle of the yard. "He goes by the name of Cormac O'Connell. He worked here." The woman shook her head. "I don't know anyone by that name." "Please," Ciara stepped forward when the woman turned away from her. "He goes by the name of Mac. He's Irish. He worked here. Any information you can tell me." A screen door banged, and a large man hobbled out of one of the cabins, leaning heavily on a crutch. Ciara's chin came up defiantly under his scrutiny. "What's going on?" he demanded of the woman. "Nothing, Garrett." She muttered her reply, picked up her laundry. "I'm looking for a man," Ciara called out to him. "Mac O'Connell?" The man's scowl deepened. "Don't know him. You'd best get from here. The owner doesn't take kindly to strangers poking about his lands. Go!" He shouted the last word when Ciara opened her mouth to argue. It echoed across the hill, and Ciara felt their resentment like the cold edge of a whip. She spun on a heel, stomped her way back through the gate. She wasn't sure what it was. It was akin to a tickle between her shoulder blades, but something didn't match up. Mac was always a popular man. His jovial, easygoing nature meant that everyone knew him. His bright red hair and tall, strong build meant that everyone saw him. Had Mac misled her when he'd given this address to her? Why? And how had he been getting her letters, if so? Something did not add up. Her resolve to get to the bottom of the mystery strengthened as she walked back to the town. How could a man simply vanish into thin air? Chapter 9. The Wiley house was an ostentatious affair, a brick edifice with a steeply pitched roof and wide square windows that winked in the sunlight. Urns and pots of flowers sat along the deep porch and were laid along the footpath with a riot of colors bursting from the ground. The yard was neat and had many buildings that were painted white. The whole place screamed wealth. Ciara sucked in a steadying breath and knocked sharply on the door. She'd woken that morning, filled with frustration, a deep vexing that was like an itch that she couldn't assuage. She'd made more inquiries about the town yesterday, and the answers were all the same. No one had heard of Mac O'Connell. It also seemed that, as Ida had said, Abel Wiley controlled much of the town, influenced a lot of the businesses, whether it was by the miners spending their money or when Wiley held a grand party and sent the money in the town. The veiled dislike for the man seemed a common thread, but if she had to lay money on it, she would say that people were scared of him. When Ciara had asked after the accidents, it was as if she was meeting a brick wall continuously. Everyone had heard about the accidents. They seemed to be regular occurrences, but only at Sediment Creek Company. However, no one knew who had been hurt or killed. It was a blanket hush. So, Ciara had decided that she was going straight to the source. A timid-looking maid in uniform opened the door and granted her access, told her to wait in the large foyer while she went and fetched Mr. Wiley. Moments later, Ciara heard footsteps as they marched towards her. The man who rounded the end of the hall and stepped into the space was tall. His steel-colored hair was styled back from a tanned face. His body was trim, and he had an uncompromising set to his jawline. A dark brow shot up as his gaze trawled indolently down over Ciara. She recognized him from when she'd caught the black horse the other day. Had she known then that it was him, she would have challenged him further that day. She could see by the gleam in his dark eyes that he recognized her too. He cocked a hip and hooked his thumbs in his belt as one side of his mouth tilted upwards. My. Had I known we would meet again, I would have dressed for the occasion. Ciara ignored the speculative twinkle in his eyes. Mr. Wiley, I'm looking for a man. The grin deepened. Well, honey, I don't normally have the women come knocking, but when the women look as good as you, I can make an exception. Her expression hardened, and she stood her ground when he took a step towards her. She didn't want to give him cause to think that she feared him. He worked for you, Abel nodded, his eyes dawdling as they traveled back up her simple skirt and blouse outfit. Uh-huh, he owes you money? She cleared her throat, injected some steel into her voice. His name is Cormac O'Connell, but he goes by Mac. She felt, rather than saw him stiffen. The smile became almost forced as he replied, Can't say as I'm familiar with the name. Are you sure? He worked for you. His hands dropped to his sides and his tone changed. Honey, I have a lot of people who work for me. They come and go daily. I don't keep track. Now, is that all? He pulled out his pocket watch and checked the time. I'm a businessman and don't have the time to talk, even to someone as pretty as you. Mr. Wiley, Ciara tried again. Mac is my brother. I just need to know where he is. If something has happened, if he's been hurt or worse, I want to know. I need to know. Please, Mr. Wiley. Emotion choked off her voice as she pleaded. I'm sorry, I don't know him. Now, if you don't mind. He indicated the door, but Ciara remained where she was. Men don't just disappear, Mr. Wiley. What happened to my brother? No one has heard of him, but he wrote to me from here. Maybe he got sick of your nagging, Abel's patience snapped. The cheerful demeanor slipped, and his voice turned cold. Get out before I call the sheriff on you for trespassing. I don't much care for immigrants, much less the ones who barge into my home and make demands. He growled and crossed the hallway and gripped her arm. Despite her protests, he pushed her back and in one fluid motion opened the front door to shove her through it. If I see you on my land again, I won't be such a gentleman. Around here, we like our streets free from vermin such as you. The door ricocheted back into its frame. She rubbed her arm absently as she stared at the wooden door. Despair closed in on her. She was still no further along to get any answers. The one question burned through her tears, though. Why had his demeanor changed so much when she'd mentioned Mac's name? Ciara marched off the porch and back down the long drive, determined in her course to find out what happened to her brother once and for all. The walk back to town had gone by in a blur. She walked unseeing along the dirt road, her mind going over and over things. The contents of Mac's letters, the stories that she'd heard about the mine, the way Abel Wiley had dismissed her, threatened her. Why? Why had he done that if he didn't have something to hide? She was so embroiled in her thoughts that she didn't hear her name being called at first. When the voice cut through the fog of her thoughts, Ciara looked up and about for the source. She'd made it back to the town and was at the edge of the street. She saw Addie across the way with two small boys near her, waving madly. Ciara waited for her to cross the street, where Addie made the boys stand and wait at the side while she caught up with her friend. You seemed a million miles away then. I was calling you for an age. Ciara shook her head and returned the hug that her friend gave her. I'm sorry. Yes, I was away with the fairies. Addie blinked at the unfamiliar term. Are you okay? You look upset. Ciara forced herself to smile. She didn't want to burden her friend with her problems. You look well. Are those Andrew's children? Yes, the bigger one is Andy and the little one is Frank. They're good boys, polite and nice too. I'm just in town running some errands. For my husband, Addie squeezed her eyes shut in a grin. Goodness, it feels strange to say that. I'm a married lady as of 2 days ago. Ciara's brows shot up. Congratulations. You married him right away then? Addie sighed a breath of happiness and put a palm to her chest. Oh, Ciara, he's just wonderful. He's sweet-natured and polite, just like he was in his letters. I'm so happy. Ciara smiled and caught her friend's hand, gave it a squeeze. I can see that in your smile, Miss Addie. Makes my heart sing to hear it. It truly does. And what news do you have? Where's Mac? Ciara swallowed over the lump in her throat, but could not stop her eyes from filling with unshed tears. She gave a shake of her head as she tried to speak. Oh, Ciara, Addie swept her into a hug, rubbed her back. Is it bad news? Any news? What's wrong? Tears spilled over her lids and Ciara accepted the handkerchief Addie gave her. Nothing, no news, no one has heard of him. If he has passed on, maybe it would be something to hold on to. I could grieve at his grave, but I'm in limbo. I feel like I'm butting my head against a wall. No one? Maybe he had the address wrong? Ciara sniffed unladylike, swiped the cloth over her face again. I have thought through all of this, over and over, but I can't think for the life of me why he'd tell me a lie. Addie looked back to where the two boys waited patiently and guided Ciara away from them a few steps. She lowered her voice. I happened to mention to Andrew about your brother. He hadn't heard of him, though he did say that many men work at the mine. More arrive every day, lots then leave. Wiley offers long hours and bonuses for overtime, pushing the men. Money is a good incentive for most, and rumor has it that Wiley isn't averse to cutting corners for the sake of another dollar. There are many accidents there, though nothing ever gets reported, and the coroner always reports that the death of these men was accidental. The Wiley family owns a lot of the town now, more since Abel succeeded his father. I get the sense that he's an overbearing oaf. His brother Noah, the one who sent you the reply? Andrew says that Noah is a good man. They have a sister too. Her name is Virginia. Apparently, Abel is trying to find a wealthy suitor to boost the family income, and he's very controlling of her. The town talk is that the other two have often tried to challenge their brother about how he chooses to run the business, but that he just shuts them down and does as he sees fit. Ciara nodded as her friend spoke. I'm grateful to you for asking your husband. What you say confirms what I've already heard about the man. There is more to this story. I shan't rest until I find answers. Please be careful, Miss Ciara. These aren't refined city men. There is lawlessness to some folk about here, and they won't take kindly to having to answer to a woman. Thinking about the way she'd been manhandled from the Wiley house or ordered away from the cabins yesterday, she didn't doubt her friend's word of caution. I'd best be off, Addie said. It's not fair to have these two young men hanging around. Please, will you come out to the house one day? It's just over on 2nd Street. We can catch up properly. I'll make us some lunch. The picture made Ciara laugh. Never in her born days had she ever been a lady who could go to luncheon with a friend. Maybe she should start. It sounds civilized for the Wild West, she said, but I would love to. Chapter 10. Ciara watched her friend leave, with the two young boys following her. Not for the first time, she wondered why she couldn't fall in love. It hadn't ever been on her mind, though she had had many a man who'd tried his luck with her. Mostly, she had laughed it off as she'd skipped along in her merry way. Maybe she just wasn't meant for married life. Goodness knows she'd been told by Mac and Pat often enough that no man would want her when she answered back as much as she did. She headed for the boarding house, past the post office and the grocery store, and watched as another stagecoach drew up and began to disgorge its passengers. She waited for a buggy to trundle along the road before she crossed to the building. The white clapboard dwelling was as trim as Mrs. Chambers was, with a flat roof and with much smaller windows than were in the Wiley home. Her booted heel struck the wooden stoop when the front door opened. Abel Wiley stalled in the doorway. Her easygoing mood that meeting Addie had brought on disappeared as her anger ramped back up when she saw him. His face turned as thunderous as hers did when he barged past her. "Out of my way," he muttered. "You get out of my way." She called back, "You don't own this property." She didn't wait for his answer, instead shut the door on his reply. When she turned into the house, she pulled up short. Bud Chambers stood by the long table. His face was expressionless. Ida was off to the side, wringing her hands in front of her. Ciara's sharp gaze assessed the pair before coming to rest on her reticule that sat atop of the reception desk. "Why is my bag there?" she asked, folding her arms as apprehension prickled her skin. "Who's been in my room?" Bud Chambers cleared his throat. "We're fully booked. It was, an oversight. We have no room for you." Ciara sucked in a breath through her nostrils, her brow climbing her head. "That right? Seemed to be room for me this morning, and I'll bet there was room for me here until that spiteful Abel Wiley visited you." "Miss Ciara, please, we don't want any trouble." Ida took a step forwards, eyes pleading. "Ida, you let me handle this," Bud snapped out. "You can't come around here causing trouble for us good folks. Mr. Wiley, he is an important man around here." "Aye," Ciara drawled. "So I keep hearing. Where am I to go? My stay is paid up for 2 weeks." Bud waggled an envelope, laid it on top of her bag. "Here is the remainder of your balance. Refunded in full. The stagecoach comes through town several times a day. You'd be best getting on the next one and minding your own business if you know what's good for you." Bud finished with a nod of his head. Ciara pursed her lips as she considered the man. "I'm not finished with my business here. I'll leave when I'm good and ready." "You'll find that the other boarding houses in town are full also," Bud informed her haughtily and folded his arms to match her stance. Ciara thought about kicking up a fuss and screaming blue murder, but her fight wasn't with the landlord. It was with that weasel Wiley. He wanted her gone, out of town, away. Ciara crossed to the table, snatched up her bag, and stalked gracefully from the house, letting the door slam shut behind her. She forced her tears down. She would not cry. Crying wouldn't serve a purpose. Wiley was acting like a man who had something to hide. Even if she had to sleep rough under the stars, she would not stop. "Addie." Ciara hurried back along the road, cutting through the slapdash buildings out onto Main Street. If she could find where her friend lived, maybe she would be able to scrounge a bed there. She was marching along the road when she saw her nemesis. He had on a crisp light-colored suit, shirt, and sported a wide-brimmed hat. He was stood in the street, shooting the breeze with 2 other men as if he didn't have a care in the world. Anger, white-hot and vicious, blew up inside of her. She marched towards him, temper thrumming along her veins. "I suppose you think you're clever, having me thrown out for no good reason?" Wiley turned his head, laughter playing around his eyes as he looked at her. The smile stayed in place, but his eyes turned cold. "I know you're not speaking to me like that, little lady," he said as he turned to face her fully. "Why are you having me chased out of town? What is it you're trying to hide?" She snapped out, drawing to a halt in front of him as fire snapped out of her. "Big tough man like you, scared of a little woman?" Abel pushed the brim of his hat back. "Now, I suggest you moderate your tone. I don't know you from Adam, but I will not have a woman speak to me in such a manner, and certainly not a troublemaker like you. You think having the Chambers throw me out of the boarding house will stop me? You can throw me out of every business you like. I will not stop until I have found out what's happened. Do you hear me? Do you think that I'm scared of you? You're mistaken, Mr. Wiley. You might own this town, but you do not own me." Abel sucked his teeth as he rocked back on his heels. "I can see you're all riled up. Maybe where you come from, that's okay, but you need to watch what you're saying to me." "Where is my brother?" Ciara bellowed, unheeding of his warning, uncaring that she was being stared at. "I know you know him. I can see it in your little piggy eyes. Where is he?" She saw the hand come up in her periphery. She saw the intent in his eyes. Cold, dark intent touched with a burning humiliation. She waited for the blow, but the hand was caught in midair. Chapter 11. She looked up and saw the strong hand dusted with dark hairs on the back of it, followed the arm and saw the familiar face of the man whose horse she'd helped capture from the other day. He was currently glaring at Abel, cold fury banked in his gray eyes. "Get in the wagon," he told her, his gaze unwavering from the other man. "Now." Ciara blinked at the stranger but did as she was told. 1 minute she was braced for a good hiding. The next she was meekly doing as she was asked. "Which one is yours?" she asked him. "Chestnut horse outside the butcher's," he replied tightly as Abel snatched his arm out of Aiden's grip. Ciara crossed the road and climbed in, staring ahead even though she heard the men exchange a few words. She grew acutely aware of the attention that was on them both, as it seemed the whole town had stopped to watch the show. The wagon moved as the stranger pulled himself into the wagon. With a flick of his wrists to the reins, the horse pulled them away, and soon enough they were heading out of town. Aiden. He'd heard her before he'd seen her. At first, he wondered if maybe he was hallucinating. There couldn't be another around here with the same color hair as his fiery vixen, could there? Where was her husband, if she was a mail-order bride? When he'd gotten over the delighted shock that she was still here in town, he'd tuned in to who she was shouting at, heard the heated exchange between them, and began to approach them. He knew from experience that Wiley was not a man to cross, let alone if you were a stranger here in the town. He'd been about to politely cut in when he'd seen Abel's hand lift to strike her. As much as she probably deserved it, Aiden felt a sudden wave of protective possession towards her. Abel Wiley seemed to think that he owned everything and everyone here in town. That because his pa had upped and died, leaving him and his siblings such wealthy people, that he believed that he'd automatically inherited the township as a whole. "Get in the wagon," he told her as his ire built. For a moment, he was expecting her to argue back, but she wisely followed his direction. When Abel pulled back his arm, Aiden released it and stepped away, fists clenched as he eyed the other man warily. "You know how to make friends, don't you, Abel?" Abel righted his hat and glared at Aiden. "Seems that both of you want to come at me for one reason or another when I'm an innocent man." Aiden snorted derisively before he turned and began to walk away from the repugnant mine owner and said, "Pull the other one. It's got bells on it." "Armstrong," Abel's voice reached him, and Aiden stopped, sending the other man a narrowed look over his shoulder. "You get a leash on her, and you mind your step." "If you're an innocent man, Abel, why are you threatening me?" Aiden shook his head and stalked back to where the woman was sat in his wagon. With his temper bouncing, he turned the wagon around and headed out of town. The noise fell away as they left the last of the town buildings behind, and Aiden felt her begin to relax as his fury ebbed away. He'd had no destination in mind other than getting away from Abel and his irritating smirk, and he realized now that he was probably taking her away from where she needed to be. He risked a glance at her. She was still staring stonily ahead. She was even more beautiful than he remembered. Red hair was coiled into a pile on top of her head, with small tendrils framing the heart-shared face and a button nose that tipped up at the end. Aiden looked back at the road, leaned forward to rest his elbows on his knees as the wagon bumped along the uneven surface. "Where are you staying?" "I can take you there." "I didn't mean to abscond with you." "I know you mean no harm," she replied dully, "and you'd be a brave man to try anything with me." His lips twitched. "That man made the Chambers evict me from the boarding house. No doubt he'll have spoken to the other ones by now, too." She sighed and shook her head. "The man is an insufferable weasel, that's for sure." Amusement threaded through his voice. "You'll get no arguments from me on that subject." "I was going to try my friend. She has just married Andrew, the blacksmith, though I'm not sure how fair it would be to visit my troubles to their door. Addie said that he's a good man, a widower." Aiden knew of the blacksmith. "He does some work for Wiley's horses." Ciara rolled her eyes. "Well, sure, I'll just find a stable or something for the night. He can't ignore me forever." "Where's your husband? Why are you getting thrown out of boarding houses?" "Or should I not ask why you were having a screaming match in the street with Copperdowns' most prominent business owner?" She sighed and leaned back against the backrest of the bench that they shared. "My brother worked at the sediment mine there. His letters stopped. I came out here looking for him, and no one has even heard of him. He's missing," she muttered, adding, "and there is no husband brave enough to take on the likes of me." Aiden pursed his lips in thought. At least she wasn't a mail-order bride, and that news pleased him more than it probably should. "Of course, Abel denied having anything to do with your brother. I claimed to have never even heard of Mac when I went to his fancy house this morning. Then, when I saw him leaving the boarding house, I just saw red. Wiley by name and Wiley by nature, that's what he is. He knows something. Someone must know. A man doesn't just up and disappear. My brother, he's a hard worker, a big man like me Da was, so he stuck out like a sore thumb. More so when he has hair like mine. I went to the miner huts and was practically chased off the lands. Abel Wiley was there the other day with your horse, stood next to the man who shot at him." Aiden nodded. "Yes, I saw him. I suspect he had something to do with it, though I couldn't prove it, and he would swear to have no knowledge on the matter, the same story he always gives. He has a habit of crying innocent when his face tells a different story. You don't like him either?" Aiden looked at her and smirked. "I think the same as you, though I don't use as colorful language." Ciara ducked her head. "Mac is always telling me my mouth runs away with me. I was pretty good and mad that he can just click his fingers and get his own way. He spends a lot of money in the town. It holds sway with some. But not with you?" The question was more of a statement and held some admiration in it. "He's always been the big man about town, but it was low-key until his father died. Now, there's no one around to curtail him. From what I see and hear, he rides roughshod over his brother and sister." "Why did he take down your fences?" "Probably because I got good and mad at him myself," Aiden said. "Part of my land that is adjacent to his mine has sunk. The rumor about the town is that he's mining where he shouldn't under land that isn't his. I spoke up at the town meeting, and in the same week, things start happening to my livestock. I believe that he's working quickly to mine as much of the copper ore as he can before the other mines buy up the land, and there's been talk of accidents, though nothing ever comes of it from the coroner." Shadows crossed her face as she digested his words. He saw the sheen of tears and felt a twinge of emotion that puzzled him. "Caning, I wonder if that is what happened to Mac. I'd like to know, one way or the other," she said. She lapsed into silence as she brooded, and Aiden let her. Rain clouds were beginning to gather on the horizon, and the wind was kicking up too. "Thank you, sir," she said in that delightful lilt of hers. "I thank you for stepping in when it wasn't your fight." "My name is Aiden Armstrong. Don't call me sir. I called my pa sir when I was in trouble." Another glance at her showed the corner of her wide mouth lifting in a smile. "Aye, me too." Aiden reined in, stopping the wagon at the side of the road. "Are you going to tell me your name?" She looked at him then. The incredible green eyes hit him full force as she considered him carefully, and he felt a pull of desire deep in his gut. Ciara O'Connell. She rolled the two syllables, Ki-ra, into one smooth word. At least now he had a name. He held out a hand and shook the tiny one that she slid into his. "That's a pretty name. A pretty name for a pretty girl." He cleared his throat to clear his mind. "What would you like to do? I can take you back to the town, try and find you a room?" "Would any of the hotels take a single woman?" she asked dubiously. He had to shrug his answer when he knew that she would struggle. She bent for her bag, and he realized that she meant to walk away. He put a hand on her arm to still her movements. She looked down at him and then lifted her gaze to his, a brow raised in question. "My mama would skin me alive if she thought I just left you out here in the wilds. You can come back to my place, have some food, and we can come up with a plan." She blinked at him. "You want to help me?" "Sure, why not?" he shrugged. "You're not making much headway on your own. Besides, if I can be a thorn in the side of Abel Wiley, even for a minute, I'm game." "You don't have to. It's not your argument," she began. "Abel Wiley won't tell you outright. We'll have to be sneaky. We need to take shelter. It's going to rain soon, and it can come down quite heavily," he commented as the wind slapped at them. Her eyes moved to the sky. "I can take you back to the town if you'd prefer." Ciara bit back a sigh as despair closed in on her. Every avenue she'd tried so far had been futile. She was no further along in finding out what had happened to Mac than when she'd been in New York. If anything, she'd found more questions than answers. Right now, she couldn't see that she had much choice. She looked at the handsome man with the storm-gray eyes and quiet air. She didn't feel threatened or intimidated by him. Most men flirted with her as if they expected something from her. He'd stepped in to save her when he hadn't needed to, which told her he had honor. She took a gamble and hoped that her instincts were right. "If you're sure it's not too much trouble?" Aiden clicked his tongue and sent the wagon rolling again, his mind delighting in the thought of her staying in his company for a while longer. "No trouble at all." Chapter 12. Ciara. She supposed she ought to be concerned that she had placed her trust into the hands of this handsome stranger. Yet here she was, swaying as his sturdy wagon trundled along the road, allowing him to take her to his home. Her mind veered between reasoning that she hadn't many alternatives laid out in front of her, to hearing her father cursing her foolhardy nature, and for having a big mouth. "Well, da," she thought to herself, "we'll soon see if you were right about my impulses getting me killed one day." Aiden, as he'd insisted that she call him, was silent next to her. She wondered if maybe he was having second thoughts about embroiling himself in more trouble. Sure, there was no love lost between him and Wiley, but wouldn't this cause further aggravation? She looked at him sideways. That he was a bit older, there was no mistaking. But he had a calmness about him, as if he was content with his lot in life. There didn't appear to be an urgency to anything that he did, though she'd seen the temper for herself. He had a bump in his long, thin nose, telling her it had been broken at one time. The gray eyes were on the horizon, framed by long, sooty lashes with lines at the corners from squinting. His mouth quirked now. "You having second thoughts?" He slid a glance at her. Ciara looked away quickly, pink color touching her cheeks at having been caught assessing him. "I was thinking the same myself. This isn't your fight, Aiden. I don't want to borrow trouble for you. My da always said that trouble seemed to follow me wherever I go. Maybe he was right. You see now, Ciara, I am a simple man. I might be a rancher, but I am a cowboy at heart. We live by a certain set of rules. You don't wave at a man on his horse. You don't put on another man's hat. You always say howdy to people. You never ride another man's horse," the gray fixed on her, "and you always help someone in need." Ciara held that look. She was mesmerized by it. "You can always go back to town," he continued. "I will take you wherever you need. Maybe tell your friend, the one who married the blacksmith, where you are. You have nothing to fear in me." She knew this. She didn't know how, but she trusted him. I am not scared, she husked at him. It wasn't fear that she was feeling, she thought. It was something more. She was aware of him. That was what unnerved her the most right now. Okay then. The wagon turned off the road and along another path. On one side, a railed fence marked the land out. This here is where I live. Ciara looked up ahead. She could see a collection of buildings. A corral on one side had horses dozing, with a stump post in the middle. A windmill towered above the huge timber construction with a pitched roof and a wide door that was stood open. That's the barn, Aiden explained. We store all the feed in there. That low, single-story block is the bunkhouse for the men I have working here for me. He pointed to the larger timber-framed building with the porch wrapped around the side and the stone chimney running up one side. My pa built that. Took a few years. He wasn't around long to enjoy it, though. He is with the Lord now. My mama runs the house, keeps us all in check. She saw an orderly yet simple setup. The long log cabin had 2 dogs that lifted their heads as the wagon turned into the yard, their tails thumping into the dust. She could see the rail used to hitch the horses to where it ran across the front of the house. Curtains framed the windows, and 2 pots of pretty flowers flanked the ends of the porch that had 2 chairs sat on it facing out towards the drive. A trim-looking woman sat in one and watched their approach. Ciara felt a little frisson of anxiety. This must be his mama. Maybe she wouldn't be so keen on her son fetching home a stray. The older woman stood up and used a hand to shade her eyes as Aiden hopped down. Ciara didn't wait for his assistance and fell into step behind him as he walked up to the house. Mama, this is Miss Ciara O'Connell. She's having a spot of bother with Abel. Ciara, this is Della Armstrong, my mother. Ciara felt the measured look from her and held it with one of her own. Pleased to meet you. You have a lovely home, so you do. Della's lips twitched. I think so. Come on in, I'll make us a drink and you can tell me what trouble that dreadful Abel is stirring up now. Aiden, you sort the horses and then you come in too. Ciara had decided within moments of meeting Della that she liked her. She had the same affable tendencies that her son possessed, and Della gave her a delighted laugh when Ciara told her so. Her home was indeed as lovely as she'd guessed. It was practical with plain furniture that had homely, pretty touches of throws, rugs, and lace cloths. Fabric hangings decorated the wooden walls, and there was a small shelf on one side that held a few ornaments and a picture. They had sat at the table, and Della had given Ciara a slice of fruit cake and a cup of perry. Della listened whilst she had shared the story of Mac, Abel, and the whole sorry mess that had landed her here in this part of the world. When Aiden returned a while later, he obediently washed off the dust from his hands and stamped it from his boots before he joined them at the table. And you were the one who caught the stallion? Della asked now. Ciara's lips twitched in a smile. Aye, and a beauty he is. Della shook her head. He can be a fiend for some. You have a touch with animals, or so I heard. Where I grew up, there were always animals. I was usually the one crazy enough to try and break in the new horses. My da said I could stick to a horse like dirt to a blanket. Della laughed again. You certainly have a way with words. Ciara sent a look at Aiden. I get told that a lot. I should love to live in a place like yours. You're very lucky, though I'm sure it's hard work. Della nodded. From dawn until dusk, and then beyond. So, what do you intend on doing about Cormac? Ciara dropped back against the chair and lifted a shoulder. I thought coming here would get me the answer, yet I'm left with more questions. No one is being forthcoming, least of all that Wiley man. Della pursed her lips in thought. There is more than one Wiley. You said that Noah had written back to you. That must mean he's involved in the business, at least to a certain extent. In my experience, Noah isn't like his brother. Aiden interjected. He's at church every Sunday for a start. Della sniffed. Ginny, too. Abel must be too busy ruling over his empire when he has more sins to repent for than most. Ciara couldn't help the bubble of laughter that came out at Della's evident detestation. Oh yes, she definitely liked the older woman. Aiden, you should go and speak to Noah. He might be more willing to help. He has his mama's good nature. I can do that, he said. He's reading the mail and sending replies. Maybe he has some knowledge that could be useful. Abel is good, but he can't do every single aspect of a business that big by himself. I'll come with you, Ciara said as excitement tripped through her. Another lead, another way to find her brother. You will do no such thing, Della told her. Her tone brooked no argument. You need to stay out of the way. When my son challenged him, he let out our animals. Having a woman humiliate him in the street, there's no telling what he might do to you. You'd do best to keep a low profile. You can stay here, out of the way, Della told her. You've both already been so kind. I couldn't impose by staying on here. And just where else are you going to go? By now, all of the businesses in town will be too scared to go against Abel by offering you a roof. But, no buts. You can stay, lend me a hand around here if it will make you feel better. I have a young filly that needs some handling if you're in the mood. Mama, have you thought that maybe Miss O'Connell is worried that her reputation could be called into question? She might want to be of good and virtuous standing, you know. Aiden's words were granted, matching derisive snorts from both women. I told you, I have no husband to be worried about such issues. Ciara was the first to speak out. I have no care what people say in their idle gossip of me. I have my own relationship with the Lord that is my concern and not anyone else's, certainly not a fictional future husband. Della smiled at Ciara, then reached over and patted her hand. We'll get along just fine, you and I. Chapter 13. Aiden. It had taken 5 days to arrange the meeting with Noah. Aiden had sent a letter and kept the contents and subject unsophisticated in case Abel had been the one opening the mail. Noah had written back, inviting Aiden to the house. Ciara had been right. The house was impressive. In comparison to his simple abode, it was imposing and luxurious. Aiden was shown into a large office that was comparable to the room that housed both his kitchen and parlor combined. He ran the brim of his hat through his fingers as he waited, turning to look at the young man who stepped into the room behind him. Noah was younger than Abel by only a few years, but his manner was more friendly, with a sunnier disposition, as he stepped forward with a ready smile. He had similar coloring to his big brother, dark eyes and hair that was only just starting to thread white through the gray steel. He offered Aiden refreshments that were declined, and then took his seat in a chair and waited until Aiden sat in the one on the opposite side of his desk. Your letter said that you had some interest in selling some land? Aiden swallowed as he felt a pang of regret at the blatant lie. I'm afraid I misled you slightly, Mr. Wiley. Dark brows met as Noah leaned on his desk and steepled his fingers. In what way? Aiden wet his lips and held back the sigh. I needed a meeting with you, away from your brother. He waited for the pleasant manner to dissipate, but instead, Noah's puzzlement deepened. What has he done now? I'm not entirely sure, though I'm convinced that he had something to do with my fences being destroyed. He lifted a hand to stem any words from Noah. I'm looking for someone that worked for you. His sister has been here looking for him since his communication with her has stopped. His name is Cormac O'Connell. People know him as Mac. I recognize the name. Yes, I had a letter regarding his whereabouts. I can tell you the same as I wrote to her. The name isn't on our staff list, though admittedly, that isn't the area where I work. Abel does the hiring and firing. You might remember him. She says he's a big man. Bright red hair, Irish accent. Noah shook his head. Have you asked Abel? Your brother and I aren't exactly on good speaking terms, Aiden told him sheepishly. And Ciara, Mac's sister, confronted him last week over the issue. He's treated her quite poorly, chased her out of the town. Noah shook his head on a sigh before he dug his fingers into his eyes and rubbed them. My brother's ways of conducting himself are questionable at times, I'll admit. I can speak to the foreman again myself, see if anyone remembers him. I am aware that Abel has a reputation, and he and I quarrel often over some of his business decisions. This young woman, she is safe? Aiden nodded. Yes, she is. That's something, at least. I've been on the receiving end of my brother's temper, and I know how ferocious he can be. I'm sorry about your fencing, too. I'm happy to reimburse you for any costs. You believe me? Aiden couldn't keep the incredulity out of his voice. Noah laid his hands on the desk as he considered his reply. Abel is making we'll say ill-advised, decisions that are making some of our more conservative investors nervous. Needless to say, I wouldn't put it past him. Because he was the oldest child, business matters automatically fell to him, yet since my father passed away, he's been almost insufferable. He treats me with the same disdain that I've heard about from other townsfolk. Noah pushed to his feet and Aiden copied. Noah stuck out his hand and shook Aiden's, and then walked Aiden to the office door. He paused after he'd opened it. I will make some inquiries. Please be assured that I will look into this matter and speak to my brother. This young woman, the sister of Mr. Cormac O'Connell, you know how to reach her if I find anything out? Aiden nodded. He wasn't about to admit she was on his ranch in case Noah was as duplicitous as his brother. Yes, I do. I'm trusting you to do as you say here. I'm not my brother, Mr. Armstrong. I want my father's legacy to be legendary, not the travesty that it is fast becoming right now. If I find anything out about this Mac character, you will be the first to know. Aiden left the house and crossed the yard to where he'd tethered his mare. He swung up into the saddle and looked back to where Noah was watching him, touched the front of his hat, and then headed down the drive. Thoughts rolled through him as he went back over the meeting in his mind. He believed that Noah was genuine in his responses, and he wondered what was happening in the background of the business. It certainly didn't sound as rosy as Abel would have the townsfolk believe. The thundering horse's hooves behind him pulled him out of his reverie, and the mare responded to his tensing by prancing about. Aiden turned into the saddle, but instead of men who were intent on murderous deeds, Aiden was surprised to see a woman on horseback, bearing down on him. Ginny Wiley. She slid to a halt not 10 feet away from him. Aiden recognized her from church, though had rarely spoken to the young girl. She had the same dark, wily eyes, though her hair was lighter than either of her brothers. It was braided down her back. Hello, Miss Wiley? Aiden removed his hat. Something the matter? Ginny's eyes were wide as they tracked the immediate vicinity, looked back over her shoulder. You were looking for a man? You called him Mac? Aiden's pulse jumped up a rate. Yes, ma'am, that's right. What do you want with him? Aiden narrowed his eyes. You know of him? What do you want with him? Her tone was firmer as she repeated the question. A friend of mine is looking for him. His sister. Are you familiar with him? There she went again, looking about her. Can you meet me later on? I don't want to speak out here. If I'm seen, meet me tonight, by the old trapper's cabin. Do you know it? The abandoned cabin popped into his mind. It was high in the hills, dilapidated and overgrown by the bushes that it was nestled in. I know it. I'll be waiting there after dusk. She wheeled her dark pony around and took off again, back the way she had come, a trail of dust kicking up in her wake. Chapter 14. I'm still not convinced having you here is the right decision, Aiden grumbled. The log cabin was as decrepit as he'd described, and there was a pungent smell that carried on the light breeze that dusted them. He was on his big chestnut, leaning on the pommel, eyes front. Dusk had fallen on the day, throwing the shadows into menace. Ciara felt the anxiety that rippled through his voice as it mirrored her own. They were high up in the hills, partially obscured by the brush, beyond any form of civilization. She snuggled deeper into the woolen coat she'd borrowed from Della as her eyes scanned the area. The nights certainly were chillier in these parts. She heard the screech of an owl, the long howl of a wild dog. Her hearing was on alert as he, too, listened for approaching footsteps. Aye, so you keep saying, she murmured, and yet here I am. In the past 5 days, she had settled into life at the ranch well, almost too well. She liked the easy pace. Aiden and his ranch hands left early most mornings and spent long hours in the saddles working the lands. This left Ciara at the homestead with Della. The work was hard, yes, and the hours were long. But being outside, with the sun beating down on her back as she worked, was the most alive that she could ever remember feeling. Even the dull ache from a tired body at the end of the day was eased when she sat on the rocking chair next to Della and watched the sun dissolve into the mountains. She'd been right in her assessment of them both. They were equally as pleasant and kind, and she had slotted into their life on the ranch as easily as they welcomed her in. The effortless pace fell into her friendship with Aiden, too. The man worked hard and was very much respected by the cowpokes who worked for him. They, too, were just as courteous and polite towards her as he was. No comments were made to him for offering refuge to a strange woman, at least not within her earshot. He had made sure that she was always comfortable, and the room she was staying in was as charming as the rest of the house. He was always dutiful towards her, even when they had bickered over the breaking in of the filly that Della had mentioned. He reasoned that she was using bizarre ways and that she was too trusting when moving around the big black beast that she had named Shadow. She argued back with him that she knew what she was doing, and he'd simply thrown his hands up in exasperation. Of course, she had gotten on with things her way. She ignored the little tingles of pleasure she'd had when he'd laughed at her pithy quips or when she'd caught him watching her with those perceptive gray eyes. She didn't have time to analyze these strange feelings that he stirred within her. They had argued when she had wanted to accompany him to visit Noah. Della had been the voice of reason that Ciara had listened to. She was safer staying out of sight of Abel. At present, he wouldn't know where she was. Instead, she had stayed at the ranch, pacing the fence perimeter, impatiently awaiting news. When Aiden had returned earlier that day with the news of the strange encounter with the youngest of the Wiley family, Aiden had resisted the idea of taking Ciara with him strongly. Ciara had fired right back, that temper of hers igniting along with her volume. This time, she would not be placated. She was not staying behind whilst Aiden went on what could turn out to be an ambush. When Della had cut her son's arguments off that not only could Ciara handle herself, but she was also good with a gun, too, he'd acquiesced, though still hadn't been happy about it. "Do you ever do as you're told?" he asked her now. "Not so much. If you get hurt," his voice trailed off, "then it'll be my fault, not yours." She whispered back. "I told you, I dragged your lovely family into this, so I could say the same for you. I'm a man. I can look after myself." It was too dark for him to see her eye roll, but she made sure he heard the snort of derision. "You really are infuriating," he muttered back. I hear that a lot too." She heard the snap of a twig somewhere, and her heart stuttered in her chest, cutting out any retort as they both went on full alert. Her mouth was suddenly dry. Through the murky light, Ciara saw the shape materialize in the darkness. A single female sat astride a small dark pony that was picking its way up the path. Ciara's horse began to fidget, and her body shifted fluidly with the movement. The young woman drew up short when she saw the two of them. "I thought you'd be alone?" Aiden's droll reply was, "So did I." Ginny waited a beat. "Follow me." They both reined their horses around and followed Ginny higher up the hill in silence. The hooves of the horses clicked against the stone pathway that they traversed. It seemed the wait was interminable as Ciara followed, as a myriad of questions volleyed through her mind. Where were they going? Where was her brother? She wisely kept them to herself, in case they drew unwanted attention from anyone who heard the three of them making their way further into the wilderness. Higher into the hill, the pathway forked and they took the left trail. It seemed to flatten out and widen slightly. Ahead, Ciara could make out a craggy outcrop of boulders and rocks, with fir trees sprouting behind them. The darkness that swallowed the foothill was actually a small opening in the rock face. Ginny stopped and dismounted, throwing the reins onto a low-lying tree branch. She waited as Ciara and Aiden did the same. Ciara's curiosity was at a fever pitch, and she was about to burst when the cave suddenly took on a gentle glow like that from a lamp. Ciara stared at it. She caught the movement, a shadow moving against the cave wall before a figure emerged from the low opening with the lamp. As the figure uncurled, moving up, 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 raising the light with him, Ciara's heart stumbled as the tears pricked her eyes. Red illuminated his head as the same keen eyes as hers scanned the threesome. She saw the same shocked expression mirrored on his face as on hers. With a small cry, Ciara flung herself at her brother. Chapter 15. "Ciara? What the?" She felt his free arm wrap around her as she held on. "Mac, oh, I knew it. I knew it in my heart that you were alive. What are you doing here, a gras?" She stepped back and slapped his arm, the warmth of his old Irish word for love rushing over her. "Looking for you, ya wee dolt. Where have you been?" She heard the hiss of breath escape him as he stepped back, saw his pained grimace in the light from the lamp. Then she looked at him. He looked a mess. Scruff grew from his chin. His hair grew wild and unkempt, framing his big head. Concern rocked through her as she saw he'd lost weight and that he had a sheen of sweat over his face despite the cool night air. "What on earth is the matter with you? You hurt?" she demanded. Mac looked at the quiet man stood behind Ciara, the calm eyes watchful. Ciara followed her brother's eyes and saw that Aiden was looking at the pistol in her brother's hands. She saw how Mac's gaze softened slightly when he looked at Ginny. "I was hurt. Miss Wiley here helped me." Ginny's nervous gaze flitted between the group and out into the darkness. "We can't stand out here talking. Someone might see the light." "You could come inside here, though. It's a bit cramped," Mac offered with a lopsided grin. Ciara eyed the narrow opening dubiously. The smell emanating from it, as well as from her brother, wasn't the best. "Why are you holed up here in the middle of nowhere? What did you do?" Ciara narrowed her eyes on Mac. "And why are you limping?" "Och, woman," he chided. "Leave it alone. You'd peck the head of a saint, I'm sure." Ciara sent a dark look at Aiden when she heard him chuckle. "I'm not climbing about in the hole." Ciara lifted a hand. "You need a decent meal and a bath, in that order." "He can't leave here," Ginny said in a fretful tone. "He's supposed to be dead." Ciara turned on the young woman, hands propped on her hips. "And just who is meant to have killed him?" "Ciara," Mac shushed her, "your voice will carry out here. Come in and I'll tell you." He didn't leave them with many choices when he turned and ducked back into the narrow opening. The three followed him in. The stark stone walls glowed pleasantly with the light from the lamp, and Mac set it against the side. Flat stones had been arranged in a semicircle, and Ciara could see the cold ashes of a fire in a makeshift pit in the ground. Rawhide covered the floor in the corner with a patchwork quilt and an animal fur cover where he'd been sleeping. A canteen sat on one of the rocks, and he moved it as he lowered himself stiffly down, favoring his left leg. He dragged a hand through his bedraggled hair, eyes back on the big cowboy who hovered in the opening. "Have a seat, friend," Mac indicated, "for surely a friend of my sister's is a friend of mine." Aiden bobbed his head and took a seat next to Ciara. Ginny was wringing her hands nervously until Mac held out his hand to her. She looked to Ciara, then accepted it and sat on the same rock as he did. Mac looped his fingers through hers and patted their joined hands. "It's okay?" he told her. Ciara's gaze bounced between them. Her mind was racing as she started filling in the gaps. "You're involved with your boss's sister. Having met the insufferable misogynist, he wouldn't like that one little bit. He certainly wouldn't like the fact that you're Irish either." Mac gave her a dry look. "Not involved, not then anyway, and not how you're saying. But I love her, that's for sure." Ginny gave him a shy smile, her dark eyes full of adoration. Mac looked to Ciara. "You met him, Abel?" Ciara folded her arms, eyes sparking. "We danced a bit, The man is a pig, sorry," she added to Ginny, who waved the apology away. "By danced, she means yelled at a lot," Aiden added. "And now she's in hiding too, especially since she bawled at him in the street." Mac dug his thumbs into his eyes. "Have I not told you in the past? You can't go around behaving like this." Ciara sent Aiden a look of annoyance. "Abel Wiley is a dangerous man, Ciara." Mac dropped his hands and fixed her with pleading eyes. "Trust me on this one. If he is out for you, you do best to stay out of his way." "She is, for now," Aiden said. "She's staying at my home. My mother lives there," he added quickly. This seemed to placate Mac. "So, if you weren't involved with Miss Wiley then, what are you doing away up here? How were you injured? Why didn't you write to me?" "Mac, I've been going out of my mind with worry." "Ginny is right. Abel tried to kill me." Ciara swallowed, shock riling through her. "Why?" Mac shrugged. "Turns out I can't hold my tongue either. Abel, he's a businessman. He's greedy too." He looked at Ginny, who gave him a nod. "Mining is a hard job, dangerous at the best of times. You know me. I put myself in the middle of these things and soon got promoted to foreman. Abel, I found him cutting corners, I suppose you could call it. Accidents kept happening, ones that could be avoided if we had been working more safely." Men falling out of lifts, that happens, and sometimes it's no one's fault. But the mines that we were digging under the land of ranchers that didn't know we were there because Abel was desperate to get to the ore before anyone else. He was making us work all hours, as is his right, but making us work faster, and they weren't well timbered. We didn't have the time to secure the frame before we would be digging again, further into the hill. The faulty construction meant that good men were being killed. The tunnel would collapse. Men I'd worked side by side with. As foreman, I had to tell their wives. Those men who knew about it, who spoke up and challenged Abel, would disappear in the night, moved on without another word. It made the others nervous about speaking up. Ciara recalled the people at the miners' huts, how they dismissed her. Maybe she'd mistaken their contempt for what it truly was: fear. Mac continued. As Abel himself said, there are always more men willing to fill the jobs to earn a crust, especially as there isn't much work about. When I questioned it, I was told to keep my mouth shut if I wanted to keep my job. Mac shifted on the rock, rubbed absently at his thigh. There was a big accident, and 3 of my good men lost their lives. It took us days to dig them out, to make the shaft safe again. Abel wasn't interested in giving them a proper burial. We were told to dig over them and keep going. I couldn't handle this. I went looking for him, to have it out with him. I was pretty riled up when I met Ginny in the yard. She calmed me down a bit. We'd exchanged a few words in the past, had been sending wee notes to each other. He leaned his head to hers. I didn't think she'd ever look twice at a brute such as me. Ginny's smile was warm and indulgent. Abel saw us in the yard, put 2 and 2 together, went back for his shotgun. Ginny told me to run, to head for the hills, but... His mouth lifted in a lopsided grin as he looked at his sister. We both know I'm not going to do that now. Ciara nodded. And you say that I'm stubborn to the point of stupid. So you got into it with Wiley? I, the whole kit and caboodle. I told him that I was going to the coroner. Prase reflected. He laughs and tells me that he's on the payroll too, that he is stating that the deaths of these men are either accidental or self-inflicted. It means that the mine doesn't get a fine, he explained when Ciara's brows met, that he isn't investigated by the sheriff or the state. Then he aims at me with his gun, and I do run then. He chases me to the mine, sending off shots as fast as he can reload. Shoots me like a dog as I'm running into the tunnel. I trip and fall. Then Abel goes back, gets a stick of dynamite, and that fool blows up the tunnel. The second accident. He buried you in there? Max shook his head. No, either he's a lousy shot or my zigzagging saved me. He grazed my head and he got me in my arm. I lay still for a while, a bit dazed by the burn in my head from the bullet. I heard him leaving and I went deeper into the tunnel, thinking I'll be safer from him. The noise was like nothing I'd ever heard. When the ground stopped shaking, I was under a length of wood. My leg was all messed up. I had to drag myself out of there. Turns out, Abel doesn't know the mines as well as I do. Some offshoots had exits higher up the hill. I managed to get myself to the entrance. He looked at Ginny. Then my angel appeared, sticks me on a makeshift stretcher, and drags my sorry carcass up this hill. You saved him? Ginny nodded. I think we saved each other. My brothers have always been all about the business. I was treated as if I got in the way. I was to be married off to secure the financial future of the business. But they don't understand the mining process as I do. I worked with my pa'a to understand this. I went down the mines with him. I know the tunnels, the back routes that are there. I knew that Mac had gone in. I'm guessing because it was dark, Abel could see that he'd injured Mac, and that burying the evidence was the best way for him to go. The next day, Abel told me that Mac had left, but I'd seen him going into the tunnel. I watched him set the explosion. Tears shimmered into her throat. By the time I realized what he was doing, I was too late to stop him. She saved me, Mac told his Ciara. She brought me food up here. She nursed me, at great personal cost to herself. Dug a bullet out of my arm. Let me tell you, that wasn't much fun either. If Abel finds out what she's done, he'll probably kill her too. What we both know, it could finish his business, close it down for good. That's why I have to stay up here. I will leave when I'm better, when I can get some money together. But for now, I have to stay dead. Chapter 16. Ciara. He can't get away with this, Ciara said. You must stand up to him. I tried, Ciara. Believe me, I tried. But he has the whole town on his payroll. He's a criminal. Mac, you owe it to those men, the ones you say were your friends. No, Ciara, I barely escaped with my life. Besides, who is going to believe a man like myself over a man like him? Aiden cleared his throat, drawing 3 sets of eyes. But it isn't just you, is it? It's you and Ginny and others who have seen what's been going on. As you say, men are desperate to hang on to their jobs, so why would they make up such a story at the risk of losing their jobs? They say there is safety in numbers. I think that may be the case here. James, chapter 4, verse 17. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them, Ciara said softly. Mac exhaled noisily, then released Ginny's hand to spear his fingers through his hair as he considered his sister. Do what is right, not what is easy, he murmured eventually. That's the truth. So how do we do this? Mac asked. I can't just march right up to him. The mayor is definitely ruled out, Ciara said, her eyes on Aiden as she pointed to him. He already took a pot shot at you. We go to the sheriff, Aiden suggested. He's a decent man. I can't see him being on the payroll. Or we could try the next town over. I happen to know that Abel has been mining under my land, so I can corroborate your story. What about Noah? He asked Ginny. He seemed to be frustrated with your brother and agreed to help me look into the disappearance of Mac. She swallowed, concern furrowing her brow. She looked to Mac and reached for his hand again. It fills me with dread to challenge him. I don't know what Noah would do, but I could speak to him, see if he will support us. Abel is still my brother, but he's truly lost his way, I think. Mac took her hand, enfolded it in his large ones. Are you sure? You've already done so much. It would mean walking away from your family wealth. Ginny smiled at him then, and Ciara could see the affection shining through her, the love shining right back from her brother's face. She looked away, self-conscious at seeing such raw emotion displayed by her brother. You know I don't care about that, Mac, she whispered. You can come back to the ranch. We have the room. I can lend you some clothes, Aiden offered. You can take a bath and have a shave, Ciara said laconically. Mac sniggered. You sound like Ma. He looked at Aiden then. Are you sure you want to involve yourself in this fight too, my friend? Ciara met Aiden's eyes across the space and felt the sway of the storm that brewed in his eyes. He broke that contact, and Ciara dropped her eyes, unsure of what these feelings meant. I am already involved, Aiden replied quietly. In more ways than one. As the 3 of them arrived in the yard, the black night sky was beginning to turn violet as the first of the sun's rays kissed the night sky goodbye, teasing back the darkness so that Ciara could see the outline of the mountains that ran along the horizon. Ginny had returned home with a promise to speak to Noah and then returned to the ranch with her news. Ciara had been on the smaller horse, so had allowed Mac to ride hers back, and she'd been seated in front of Aiden on his big chestnut. At first, the suggestion had seemed logical. Mac was still weak and not strong enough to manage the horse and an additional rider, and Aiden had the bigger horse. But feeling the warmth from Aiden's body as it encompassed hers, where they filled the saddle together, having one arm loosely on her waist, as the other had guided his horse along the trail back down the hill, sent her body into turmoil. His quiet voice murmured to his ride, to her brother, to her, and she felt the vibrations through her chest. All she could do was manage a nod. Never in her born days had she been so aware of another man. She trusted him, and that in itself was strange enough, but now she had cognizance of him, his tone, his strength, how he felt against her, of his quiet and unwavering support. His horse stopped in the middle of the yard now, and Ciara heard the other animals stirring. Heads popped over stables as Aiden swung his leg up and over, pressing his body to hers. When he dropped, she felt the break in contact as a loss, and she shivered. He held his hands up to help her down. Normally, she would wave away such assistance with her streak of independence, but she allowed him to hand her down. He tossed the reins over the hitching rail and went to catch Mac before he hit the ground. Ciara was galvanized into action when she saw Mac stumble, and she could see the pain etched into her brother's face. Everything fell away as she focused on him. She had her brother back. He was alive and mostly in one piece. She needed to focus on that, not on this craziness that seemed to have inserted itself into her mind. She was exhausted, drained from all the mad running around in California. "You big dope, why didn't you say you were hurting?" Ciara tucked herself under Mac's other arm, her arm grazing Aiden's as she reached around his back. She ordered herself to stop thinking about the quiet rancher. Mac snuffled out a laugh as he hobbled along towards the ranch house. "Now, where would that get me? A man admitting such a thing?" Ciara tutted her annoyance as the door was wrenched open and Della stood in the space, peering through the dim night. "I take it you had a successful night then, whilst I was waiting here besides myself," she muttered, stepping back to allow the three across the threshold. She took one look at the big red-haired man hanging between the two of them. And this must be the elusive Mac O'Connell. Mac dropped into the seat, closed his eyes on a groan. "Aye, that'll be me, ma'am. Give me a minute before I use my Irish charm on you." Della moved to the kitchen and set a pan on the stove. "Ciara, bank the fire. Aiden, go find me another bucket or two to fill this bath. If I'm to be charmed today, I want the charmer to be at least presentable in my company." Chapter 17. Thomas Crawford dismounted his horse, tossed the reins over the rail that was at the front of the grand edifice of Abel Wiley. His two deputies waited out of sight at the end of the drive in case they were needed. The star pinned to his chest winked in the sunlight that blazed out of a cloudless azure blue sky as he ran his eyes over the building. He removed his hat, combed his fingers through his hair to neaten it as he walked up the wide porch steps and knocked sharply on the door. He gave a smile to the young maid that permitted him entry and waited in the hallway as she scurried off to retrieve her boss. Thomas admired the neat and sumptuously decorated room, musing that his uncomplicated abode didn't compare, but he preferred the easy life. He'd seen the fall of many a rich man during the war and knew that in those final moments, when boys realized that they were not for this world, all of these items, these trinkets that some people surrounded themselves with, meant nothing. "Sheriff Crawford, to what do I owe this honor?" Thomas nodded his head, keeping his expression jovial. "Not so much honor, Abel. I had sent you a message asking you to come down to the office." "Ah, that's right. I told your messenger it wasn't a good time for me." Abel gave him a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Now isn't so good either. Is it important?" Thomas barely concealed a sigh as he sucked on his teeth. "Abel, I consider myself a patient man. I like the law. It's simple and orderly. I like to follow the rules. Would you consider those traits important?" Confusion crossed Abel's face. Yes, I suppose I do. When a sheriff asks for you to stop on by, is it advisable to make him wait almost a week? Then when the sheriff has to take time from his busy day to make a house visit, and you ask me if it is important, would you say it's normal to have a sheriff stood in your hallway? Abel cleared his throat, sent him a nervous smile. No, not for me anyway. Please come through to the office. Can I offer you some refreshments?" "No, thank you, Abel. This isn't a social visit." Thomas sat in the chair indicated by Abel, waited for him to drop into the big chair on the other side of the wide mahogany desk. He gave the businessman a stare, waited for him to begin to fidget, for the flash of annoyance to cross his expression. "What is it, Sheriff? You want to sit here and just gaze at each other?" Abel snapped out. "No, Abel, I'm just trying to think about how to approach this." Thomas rubbed his chin, the bristles rustling on his nails as he let him sweat it out some more. "Approach what?" "Have you heard of a man named Cormac O'Connell?" The annoyance blazed to anger, and Abel rolled his eyes. He seemed to sag in his seat in relief. "Not this again. You must have been speaking to that Irish tramp, the mouthy one with the red hair. She's got an attitude on her. I wondered why she'd gone so quiet." Thomas raised his brows but didn't say a word, waiting to see what he came out with next. "I'll tell you what I told her. I don't know anyone by that name. I've never had an employee with that name." Thomas sniffed and then reached into the pocket inside his vest, took out a sheet of paper. He opened it and laid it on the desk. Abel's smile vanished as he saw the Sediment Mining Company insignia at the top. "This is a staff ledger, filled in by your hand, and given to me by Noah. The name Cormac Mac O'Connell is on there. He's listed as a foreman. Your company has paid him his wage for the past year, though there is no record of him being paid for the past 3 months. Abel stared at the paper. His eyes narrowed in anger. He considered his answer. I have a lot of employees. I can't be expected to remember everybody on my payroll, Sheriff. I didn't meet the man personally. Thomas nodded again. I have a whole host of statements from minors who claim to have seen you in conversations with Mac. Some of those statements say that you quarreled with him on more than one occasion. What were you arguing about? Which minors? They're lying, obviously. You will tell me their names. Thomas was unfazed by the fury that was spat at him. There are over 100 names on the list, Abel. What? But that's ridiculous. I employ over 100. Thomas nodded as realization dawned on Abel's face. The whole of your workforce, Abel. Every last man has spoken up. Abel's mouth flapped like a fish out of water. That's impossible. I pay their wages. How dare they? Thomas lifted a hand to stem the flow. They've told me some worrying facts about how you've been conducting your business. I've made sure that the coroner checked any accidents to keep everything above board. Everyone has been reported as neglect on the worker's behalf or suicide. Ah, yes. That leads me nicely to mention about the coroner. When I asked how he has funded such purchases as pockets of land, mining shares, even that new fancy carriage of his, I'm afraid that he caved and admitted that you have been paying him handsomely to report falsely so that you are not fined by the state. Abel's hand thumped down on his desk. That's outrageous. I do not like what you're suggesting here. Thomas settled back into his seat, crossed an ankle over the knee, and set his hat on the bent knee. He linked his fingers across his stomach. What do you think I'm suggesting? That I am corrupt, that I am a blackmailer. Thomas bobbed his head, his demeanor calm and unflappable. Yes, I can see how you'd think that. You cannot come into a man's house and throw these accusations around. I will speak to the mayor about this. I will have your job. Oh, Thomas pulled his mouth back, rubbed his chin some more. Then I guess I ought to add attempted murder into the accusations, too. Abel's eyes bulged as his face turned puce. Who am I meant to have tried to kill? Mac O'Connell. Abel stalled for just a second. He shook his head, but no words came out. I told you, he left. Overnight, I caught him trying to assault my sister. I threw him off my land. Gosh, so you admit now to knowing him? Yes, but he left, though not before he tried to destroy the mine by blowing up the tunnel. He's dead, okay? He got buried in the mine collapse. He blew up your tunnel or died in a mine collapse? Yes, Abel cried triumphantly, seemingly unaware that he was contradicting himself. I was protecting my sister. He did this to himself. The way your sister tells the story, she saw you setting the charges at the entrance of the mine tunnel while knowing Mac was still inside there. Ginny? You've spoken to Ginny? Thomas nodded his head slowly. That O'Connell, he was a rogue, a cad. She'll say anything because I broke up their relationship. She's just a silly girl mourning the death of a man she had a crush on. I admit that I knew him, but he did this to himself. I didn't kill him. No, Thomas smiled for the first time. You didn't. He looked fairly alive and well when I spoke to him last week, though I'm still trying to work out how a man who was in a mine collapse got a bullet in his arm. Abel's face fell. Thomas could see that he was a man who was ensnared in a net of his own making. Thomas had enough evidence and statements to sink him. This was what he loved about the law. It was simple, clear-cut. How much is this going to take to make it go away? Abel asked him. Thomas's brows climbed his forehead. Are you offering to bribe a man of the law? Abel snorted. Everyone has a price. Name it and it's yours. Thomas's foot struck the floor as he unfolded, and he leaned forward to give the mine owner a stony glare. Not this lawman. I will let a judge and jury decide your fate, and after that, you will be judged by the Lord. That's a good enough price for me. Chapter 18. Noah offered me the job. Ciara turned her head to look at Mac. Of course, he did. You're a good and dependable man. They were leaning on the railed fencing that ran around the edge of the yard. Ciara had her one foot on the bottom rung, and she rested her chin on top of her hands that were stacked on the top railing. Shadow crunched happily on the hay in the corral as he presided over his mares. Mac sighed gently, and Ciara examined him. He'd healed well, though still walked with a limp. He'd cut his hair and had had some decent meals that had made him start to fill out again. His eyes were on the horizon, the sky, the hills. She followed his gaze. "I don't think I'll ever get used to how blue the sky is here," he murmured. A small smile flitted across her mouth. A pang of sadness rippled through her. She'd hoped that he would return with her to New York. She'd enjoyed spending time with him in the past 2 months. "You've accepted the position. You're staying here." Green met green when he looked at her, and he gave her a shrug. "Yes, now that Abel is in San Quentin, I have no reason to hide. I can help Noah build a good mine as his da wanted. Noah is a decent man, fair too." "What about Ginny?" A smile drifted across his lips at the mention of her name. "Well, I know what I want to do there. I love her, Ciara. Even before she helped me, I loved her. I intend to ask her to marry me, though I'm not sure she'll agree, or even if it's right." When she thought about the young woman and how courageous she must have been to flout the rules imposed by Abel, she knew that the feelings were mutual. She'd had many a conversation with Ginny since the sheriff had arrested Abel. She'd stood next to her when Abel had been escorted by the deputies from the family home, had held her hand as Abel had cursed her name, all of their names, and she'd offered the brave woman her comfort. "She'll agree. Why wouldn't she?" Ciara said, now bumping her shoulder to Max. "She's a fool in love, all right." "Aye, we both are. And what about you, a gra?" "What about me? You and your man back there." Mac indicated with his head, and she saw Aiden leaning against the wooden rail around the porch, watching them. Ciara quickly looked away. "He's not my man, you wee dolt." "Sure, he is. I've seen the way he looks at you. You'd have to be blind not to notice. How is he around you?" Ciara avoided her brother's look, and instead she focused on the black stallion. "You've gone and lost your big head up in those hills. I'm going back to New York." "Ach." Max shook his head and leaned away from the rail, tapping it with his hands. "You're so stubborn, Ciara. You're happy here. I can see it in how you are around those big beasties. You always were happiest when you were outdoors. It drove our da insane, for sure." Ciara swallowed down on the lump in her throat. Mac was right, of course. She loved it here. The wide-open spaces, the easygoing pace. The townsfolk knew who she was, respected her, and greeted her in the street because of what she'd helped achieve for the town. But she'd been so unsettled here, and she wasn't quite sure why. "I might be happy here, but there is nothing to stay for." She replied quietly, "You will move on with your life. You've already given up so much for me, and I don't want to hold you back. I need to make my own way now." Mac's brow hooked up, and again he looked pointedly back at Aiden. "Him? He's a good man. The best, I'll give you that. He doesn't see me that way." Mac dropped his forehead onto his arms and gave a deep belly laugh. "And you say that I'm the one with the thick head." Ciara tutted and cuffed the back of his head. The laugh came again. His head came back up. "Since when did you hold back on something that you wanted? Did you not come chasing halfway across the country looking for me? Did you hang about for months once you knew that I was safe? Don't think that I don't know. You handed in your notice at that job in New York. You could have gone straight back to your life if you'd have wanted. I'm not leaving you when you could barely hold up your body weight, though I'm not surprised, judging by the size of your big head," she muttered. "You stayed because you had a reason to, just the same as me. You like yourself a cowboy." "Do not." "Aye, you do. And he likes you." She jolted and blinked at her brother as hope began to unfurl itself in her belly. Ever since that night that they'd found Mac, she'd grown more aware of Aiden. She hadn't known how to behave around him. "Has he said something to you?" A knowing smile curved Mac's lips. "No, but I knew that I was right. I have never seen you like this over anything before, and especially not a man." "Like what?" "All agreeable and careful." She cuffed him again. "I'm no such thing." "Fine," he spread his hands. "Go back to New York. Don't see him again then." Her lower lip disappeared between her teeth at the terrifying and heart-wrenching thought. She blinked rapidly at her brother, and he shook his head. Go and put the poor man out of his misery. I can feel his eyes boring into us from here." Aiden sucked in a breath as he saw Ciara look back at him once and then again. He'd been watching the two of them chat away, though he could guess what they were talking about. He knew that Mac had accepted the job at the mine. He also knew that he would be staying on in the community, and that was a good thing. It had been obvious by the unanimous support from the miners that he was a respected man, an honorable one. The town needed more people like that, especially since Abel had been sent to the Hooskow. He admired Mac himself, but he was also in love with his sister. She'd been subdued since the night that they'd found him. Della had told him that it was because her mind was otherwise occupied, and that once Mac was better, Aiden needed to tell Ciara how he really felt, or she'd head back to New York. Mac had recovered, yet Aiden couldn't bring himself to tell her. He'd argued with Della that Ciara was too young for a husband, too fiery for a quiet man like him, that she had a life in New York, away from mines and horses and ranches. But that wild red hair and tranquil green eyes had insinuated themselves into his subconscious so that she filled his every waking thought, slipped through dreams, so that he woke in a sweat and twisted in his bedclothes. He must be sick. Della had laughed when he'd voiced this concern and told him that he was sick. Lovesick. Being able to hold her close when they'd ridden back to the ranch the night that they'd found Mac had been bittersweet. For now, he knew the feel of her in his arms, the scent of her. It had driven him mad to the point where he'd had to distract himself by checking on Ginny, on Mac, on anything other than the beautiful woman nestled against him. Now he watched the two exchange a hug, and his heartache intensified. She was saying goodbye to her brother. She was leaving him. She was leaving Copperdowns. He loved her, and he couldn't tell her. Chapter 19. Ciara. She came to a standstill in the middle of the yard, halfway between her brother and Aiden. He hadn't moved from the post. The wind wafted gently, blowing her hair into her face. Irritably, she scooped it back out of the way and fisted her hands on her hips as she stared at the rancher. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and she felt quite nauseous at what she was about to do. But her brother had been right. She'd faced worse fates. The worst that could happen is Aiden would tell her that he didn't love her back. She would return to New York, find a job, go on with her life. She just needed a moment of courage. "You're looking at me like you want to shoot me," Aiden said from where he stood. He pushed away from the rail, stepped down into the yard. "Sorry," she said. "I'm thinking." His long legs ate up the space between them. "Well, whilst you do that, there's something I need to say to you." He took a breath, blew it out sharply. "I'm in love with you, Ciara. I think I have been since the moment I clapped eyes on you." She blinked at him, her jaw slack as that hope bloomed in her chest, choking off her voice. "I know, I'm too old for you. You deserve a younger man, and—" "You're not that old," she said, softly. "Barely 30. "Yes, but that's still older than you. I am only telling you because I don't want you to go back to New York. We could have a good life here, hard work, yes, but I would work hard to make it better for you. I don't want you to go. Stay, please, for me." She swallowed, her heart skittering about in her chest. She lay a hand against her breastbone, as if to hold in her happiness. "Say that again." "Which part?" "The love part. I want to make sure that I heard it right." Aiden stepped up to her, caught up her hands, and held them in his so that they were sandwiched between them. "I'm in love with you, Ciara. I can't stop thinking about you." She shook her head. "You wee chucklehead." "I am?" he murmured to her as his eyes softened, the gray swirling. "I," she replied as her heart soared. "I was going to tell you that I loved you. You just beat me to it." The smile that drifted across his lips was mirrored in his eyes as they gazed down at her. "You love me back?" "Aye, Aiden, I do. I have for a while, though I wasn't sure how to tell you. You didn't give me a clue, to be fair." "You love me," he exhaled. "And you'll stay?" "Yes, as long as you can handle me. I won't change, you know." He stepped against her so that his hips aligned with hers and slid his arms around her waist. She ran hands up and over his shoulders, then linked her fingers behind his neck. "My fiery bride," he purred to her, voice low as his head dipped down. "I don't want you to change. I'd rather spend my days arguing with you than spend them missing you." She smiled then as she met her mouth with his, met him kiss for kiss, and soul for soul, the end.